He wants to meet with the emperor. At this moment, there was a huge commotion in the royal palace. In the air above the royal palace, an imposing figure could be seen flying towards the emperor palace. The guards didn't dare to obstruct him. The Cloud King was a character who had already been conferred the title of king. He had contributed greatly to the fight for the throne and had immense authority. He could directly enter the emperor palace. Only those who entered the forbidden palace would have to report to the emperor. Yunting seeks an audience with the emperor. Outside the forbidden palace, the Cloud King couldn't enter directly like Qing'er. He could only seek an audience from outside. Cloud King, what's the matter? The voice of the emperor rang out. Qin Wentian bewitched Her Highness with evil intentions. My granddaughter, Charlene, died because of him. Please punish Qin Wentian. The Cloud King naturally didn't dare to criticize Qing'er. He just wanted to punish Qin Wentian. If the emperor had agreed to Qing'er and Qin Wentian, he wouldn't have come to the imperial palace. However, the emperor didn't seem to agree. Moreover, Princess Qing'er was extremely stubborn. She even moved to Princess Changping's residence to be with Qin Wentian. In the eyes of the Cloud King, the princess was being willful and rash. She was challenging the emperor. At this time, the emperor might also be prejudiced against Qin Wentian. Although the Cloud King was a nobility, he wouldn't be blinded by hatred. It wasn't a big deal for the juniors to cause trouble, but before knowing the emperor's attitude, as a nobility, they acted recklessly against Qin Wentian. If the emperor was displeased, it would be terrible. After all, Qin Wentian had been brought to the imperial palace by the princess. I already know about Charlene's death. She was indeed in the wrong. Qing'er brought Qin Wentian to Chang'anhou as a guest, but she insulted Qin Wentian and wanted to kill Qin Wentian. However, she is already dead. You should know who is in the right and who is in the wrong. I won't say anything more. Cloud King, focus on your cultivation and break through to the Emperor realm as soon as possible. Don't worry about the juniors. The Emperor's voice rang out. The Cloud King's heart was as clear as a mirror. He bowed and said, Yes, Emperor. Yunting will take his leave. As soon as he finished speaking, the Cloud King turned around and left without saying another word. Since the Emperor had said so, he should know what to do. The Cloud King returned to his residence. No one dared to touch Qin Wentian. It was rumored that the Emperor's intention was that the nobility should not interfere in the matters of the juniors. The Emperor's attitude seemed to be clear. He did not support the relationship between Qin Wentian and Qing'er. But because of his love for the princess, he did not strongly oppose it. Everything would take its course. The emperor's love for Princess Qing'er is indeed unparalleled. Many people sighed. How hateful, the princess' heart was now seized by an outsider. With the great emperor's declaration, the voices in the manor of the marquises were gradually silenced. The Marchioness of Chang'an brought Charlene's corpse back and left with hatred. However, she was helpless. No one dared to act forcefully in the royal palace, not to mention that she was merely the Marchioness of Chang'an. If she were to be unreasonable, she would implicate the manor of the cloud. In the Princess Changping residence, the courtyard where Qing'er and Qin Wentian were staying in was enveloped by a layer of formless runic light. This seemed to be a formation to block out immortal senses. In the royal palace, there were many such formations in all the residences. No one liked to be disturbed and exposed to immortal senses. After the formation was activated, immortal senses could still barge in. But if the formation was broken, it would alert the people in the residence and that would be considered a provocation. Usually, no one would do such a thing. The environment of this courtyard was indeed very good. It was specially chosen by Princess Changping. It spanned over 10 miles and there were mountains, rivers, pavilions, and lakes. Fish could be seen swimming about in the lake. Qin Wentian was currently angling. Although the commotion outside was intense, he wanted to be at peace. Angling would allow him to focus and cultivate his mind, allowing him to calm his heart as soon as possible so that he could break through to immortal foundation. Qing sat beside Qin Wentian, resembling an immortal couple. Both of them were extremely outstanding people. Father is worried that I might be trapped by love and it might affect my cultivation. Qing stared at the ripples in the lake as she spoke in a low voice. I understand His Majesty's thoughts. Qin Wentian smiled. Although my talent isn't bad, in the immortal realms, celestial phenomenon ascendance can only be considered weak. Immortal foundation is merely the starting point. His Majesty is also worried that you might encounter danger if you were to follow me. Qing turned her head and glanced at Qin Wentian. She only saw a faint smile on Qin Wentian's face. He was also an intelligent man, how could he not understand His Majesty's thoughts? His Majesty not forcefully objecting was already an extraordinary display of magnanimity. No matter how outstanding his talent was, anyone in the royal palace could easily kill him. Although he had the talent to become an immortal emperor in the future, there would be many trials and tribulations on the path to immortal foundation. No matter how high his talent was, the probability of him dying was still extremely high. Am I really so handsome? Qin Wentian smiled when he saw Qing staring at him. His words caused Qing to roll her eyes at him before turning her gaze back to the lake. After the baptism of the sacred luminance, our cultivation bases would stabilize. It shouldn't be difficult for us to break through to immortal foundation. After that, will you return to our particle world? Qing asked. I will. Qin Wentian nodded. Bring me along then. I will accompany you to fetch Qingcheng. Qing's voice was gentle, causing Qin Wentian to feel moved in his heart. If His Majesty knew about Qingcheng, what would his attitude be? Even Qing herself didn't dare to say. The pressure they were facing now was much greater than what they had imagined. Although it was normal for experts in the immortal realms to have many wives and concubines, what status did Qing have? What status did the immortal emperor have? Even the nobles in the royal palace would want to kill him if they knew about this. Qing was the only one who didn't care. Qing Qin Wentian gently called out. Qing turned her gaze over only to see Qin Wentian's eyes were filled with gentleness, as though he wanted to melt her. Qing averted her gaze, not daring to look directly into Qin Wentian's eyes. At this moment, Qin Wentian leaned his head forward. Qing's gaze froze as her heartbeat quickened. After that, Qin Wentian kissed her on the lips. A strange feeling bloomed in Qing's heart as her heart palpitated even more violently. Qin Wentian swiftly shifted his gaze away, staring at the cold beauty before him. At this moment, his face was flushed red. His heart was filled with boundless emotions. Qing, I will definitely marry you in a glorious manner. I won't let the princess of an immortal empire suffer any grievances. Qin Wentian's eyes were filled with resolution. Qing averted her gaze and looked forward. She did her best to restrain her emotions and remained expressionless, yet waves of warmth flowed through her heart. Is this the feeling of love? I'll go and rest first. Qing stood up and slipped away. With her back facing Qin Wentian, her eyes shone with a radiant light. Qin Wentian was still fishing. His fishing rod swayed, yet it was as though he didn't hear it. It was unknown where his heart had floated to. He licked his lips, as though he was still reminiscing about that cold and beautiful countenance, as well as the feeling he had felt when he touched her. Today, countless geniuses in the royal palace couldn't sleep. They knew that Qing and Qin Wentian were staying in the same courtyard, and they had no idea what would happen. They wanted nothing more than to tear Qin Wentian into pieces. That was an incomparably cold and arrogant princess. She had a noble status, outstanding talent, and a peerless countenance. When they thought of the possibility that the pure and unblemished princess might be taken away by that bastard Qin Wentian, they felt as though countless ants were crawling over their hearts. However, they were helpless. The immortal emperor didn't say anything. Could it be that they would rush over and separate the two of them? On the second day, there were still countless people paying attention to the movements in the Princess Changping residence. Today, there were already people who delivered an invitation to Princess Changping's residence. This invitation was sent out from the Qi King Manor. Not only was it sent to Princess Changping's residence, it was also sent to the various residences of nobility, inviting the younger generations to attend the banquet. Not only that, Qin Wentian was also invited. The crown prince of the Qi King Manor has exited his seclusion. He was trying to break through to Immortal Foundation, but now, he can't help but exit his seclusion. Seems like it's all because of Qin Wentian. The crown prince of the Qi King Manor has just exited his seclusion. He has always been an admirer of Princess Qing'er. The hearts of countless people trembled. This time around, Qin Wentian finally had a worthy opponent. The crown prince of the Qi King Manor had outstanding talent and had returned from the city of ancient emperors several years ago. It was said that he was ranked within the top 5 in the Immortal Ascension rankings. Now that he has been in seclusion for so long, it was unknown how powerful he was now. Chapter 996. In Princess Changping's residence, Qin Wentian stared at the invitation in his hand as he spoke in a low voice, the Qi King Manor. Qing'er walked to his side and spoke. The crown prince of the Qi King Manor, Yang'an, came back from the city of ancient emperors many years ago. It's said that he was ranked number 5 on the Immortal Ascension rankings back then and has been in closed-door seclusion ever since, trying to break through to Immortal Foundation. Now, he must be even stronger than before. Let me accompany you. I'll go by myself. The Immortal Emperor told the Cloud King not to interfere with the juniors. In the royal palace, those people from the nobility manor wouldn't dare to do anything to me. The invitation didn't include you, princess. If I bring you along, wouldn't others laugh at me? Qin Wentian smiled. Don't worry, I can handle it. Qing'er stared at Qin Wentian's face as she nodded her head lightly. Okay. If they go overboard, they can return here immediately. Qin Wentian nodded. He held on to Qing'er's dainty hand. Qing'er's hand trembled slightly, but she didn't struggle and allowed him to hold her hand. I'm someone who is going to marry a princess of an immortal empire. How can I allow others to look down on me? Qin Wentian joked. At noon, the Qi King Manor in the royal palace was extremely lively. Many members of the nobility clan had received invitations and came over. They either rode on immortal weapons or rode on greater demons, exuding an imposing aura. Outside the Qi King Manor, the roars of many greater demons could be heard. Many of these greater demons were pure-blooded mutated beasts that had the same cultivation bases as their masters. They had grown up together with them. The Qi King was a character who had been conferred the title of king in the immortal empire. He was extremely powerful and was a peak-stage immortal king expert. The Qi King Manor also had an extraordinary status in the royal palace. Now that the crown prince of the Qi King Manor, Yang'an, had sent out an invitation to deal with Qin Wentian, the number of people attending the banquet was extremely high. Outside the manor, the young geniuses discussed. One of them asked, "Is Qin Wentian here yet?" "I don't think he's here yet." "I wonder if he'll attend the banquet," another person replied. Perhaps he will come to the banquet, but I'm afraid he will bring Princess Qing'er with him." The person who spoke earlier coldly snorted. At this moment, several voices rang out. The gazes of the crowd turned to a certain direction, including the two who spoke earlier. It's Qin Wentian. Is he Qin Wentian? It seems that he is just so. What kind of useless demonic beast is this mount? He's so chubby. He actually has a pet. Everyone spoke. The person Qin Wentian sat down on was Little Rascal. He didn't transform, he only caused his body to grow larger. His chubby body exuded a sense of cuteness, but that was only in the eyes of a daughter. In such a situation, it was somewhat comical. The demonic pet's eyes were huge and flickered continuously as it looked around. Looking at the surrounding greater demons, its chubby body swaggered forward with bright eyes. "Brother Qin, this demonic beast of yours is so adorable." There was a female beside Qin Wentian. The demonic beast she was sitting on was a ferocious bird with fiery red wings. Its eyes gleamed with a terrifying light. This was a crimson blood rock, a descendant of the Great Rock, possessing the pure bloodline of the Great Rock. This pet is so chubby, can I borrow it to play with it for a few days? Another young man laughed. He was sitting on a ferocious white tiger that exuded a fearsome baleful aura. It stared at little rascal and let out a low roar. Several young men surrounded Qin Wentian. The greater demons they were sitting on kept roaring as a terrifying demonic might engulf this entire space. Would this little fellow be afraid? Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed, intentionally using their demonic beasts to get closer to Little Rascal. Little Rascal, you are being looked down upon by others. Qin Wentian laughed as he patted Little Rascal on its head. Little Rascal's eyes shone with a bright light, not showing any signs of fear at all. It then spoke in a baby voice, fight with them, that way I can eat their demonic beasts. There are so many greater demons here, they would surely be delicious. Everyone was stunned when they heard Little Rascal's words. After which, they all started laughing uproariously. Brother Qin, this pet of yours hasn't weaned yet, right? Ha, this pet is simply too adorable, it doesn't even know it's afraid. It probably doesn't know that these demonic beasts can swallow it whole in a single gulp. Everyone laughed, feeling that this was extremely interesting. Little Rascal doesn't know any better. Brothers, please don't blame it. Qin Wentian clasped his fists to the crowd. He sat on Little Rascal's back and rubbed its head. Little Rascal, seems like I have to nourish you later. Only then would you be able to grow up faster. Go to hell. Little Rascal cursed in a low voice, glaring hatefully at the demonic beasts in the surroundings. Although these greater demons were mounts, they were all capable of understanding human emotions. All of them had fiendish expressions on their faces as they stared at Little Rascal, as though they were intentionally trying to scare it. Don't scare me, this Bao Bao isn't afraid of you all. Little Rascal pointed its claws at the demonic beasts as it arrogantly inclined its head. Those greater demons all had expressions of interest on their faces. What an interesting fellow. The group of them entered the Qi King Manor. A guard led them in and Qin Wentian observed the people in the surroundings. The majority of these people were at the Celestial Phenomenon realm, and there were also a few Immortal Foundation experts among them. They were all extremely young Immortal Foundation characters with extraordinary talent. A banquet was already prepared in the Qi King Manor. Many people had already arrived and were seated. Qin Wentian turned his gaze to the person in the lead. That person had a jade-like countenance and radiated vitality. His eyes gleamed with sharpness, and although his aura was retracted, Qin Wentian could still sense an extraordinary aura from him. It was as though he had already surpassed the Celestial Phenomenon realm and stepped into Immortal Foundation. The Crown Prince of the Qi King entered closed-doors seclusion after exiting the City of Ancient Emperors. Seems like he has already established his Immortal Foundation. Qin Wentian silently mused. Many people could sense the aura exuding from the Crown Prince of the Qi King. Young and someone asked, the Crown Prince has already become an immortal? That's right, the Crown Prince of the Qi King, Yang'an, has already broken through to Immortal Foundation. Our Evergreen Kingdom has yet another character who became an immortal within 100 years of age. Someone replied. Congrats, congrats. The Crown Prince is awesome. If he had stayed in the City of Ancient Emperors back then, he would definitely be ranked number 1 in the Immortal Ascension rankings. Everyone congratulated him, and there were even some who felt jealousy in their hearts. Immortal Foundation was a watershed, and becoming an immortal within 100 years of age was another hurdle. Yang'an managed to become an immortal within 100 years of age, and he would definitely be highly regarded. Someone glanced at Qin Wentian. Seems like Yang'an didn't intentionally come out of seclusion for Qin Wentian. It was just a coincidence. He had already broken through to Immortal Foundation and coincidentally met Qin Wentian. Hence, he decided to set up this banquet. Everyone is too polite. Quickly, let's enter the banquet. Yang'an smiled as everyone took their seats. Qin Wentian casually found a seat at the back and sat down, appearing extremely carefree. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they come. No matter what Yang An's cultivation base was, it had nothing to do with him. Since Yang An invited him, he would naturally come and enjoy the food and drinks. Everyone seemed to be chatting very happily earlier. Yang An asked. We were talking about Brother Qin's pet. This pet is too adorable, and it even said that the greater demons we ride on would definitely be delicious. Ha! This is the first time I've seen such a foolish fellow, he doesn't even know fear. He simply doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth, and doesn't know what kind of existences are around him. Someone glanced at Qin Wentian, as though there was a double meaning in his words. Oh! Only then did Yang An turn his gaze onto Qin Wentian. He smiled, this must be Brother Qin, right? You just came out of seclusion and Brother Qin's name keeps ringing in my ears. Since you're able to become the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings, you must be an extraordinary character. Crown Prince is too polite, Qin Wentian replied. I wonder who were the top rankers of the Immortal Ascension rankings when Brother Qin came out. Back then when I was around, there were a few extremely powerful characters. For example, Zi Daoyang, the son of Zidi. When I left, Zi Daoyang was already the top ranker. He should have already left the Immortal Ascension rankings. Yang An smiled. Qin Wentian understood in his heart. If Zi Daoyang didn't die, he might be the same as Mo Xia, stepping into Immortal Foundation. After all, even Yang An had already broken through to Immortal Foundation. However, breaking through to Immortal Foundation couldn't be determined by one's strength alone. There were some who had yet to reach the peak of celestial phenomenon, yet their combat prowess could already sweep away peak-level celestial phenomenon ascendants. An example was Zi Daoyang and Mo Xie. Their cultivation bases might not be as deep as Yang An's, but they could already defeat Yang An. But Yang An might have already broken through to Immortal Foundation before them. Other than this, one also had to consider one's fate, one's state of heart, and one's requirements for one's Immortal Foundation. After all, Immortal Foundation could be divided into 6 tiers and 3 grades. However, Yang An's words seemed to indicate that he was doubting the worth of being the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings. Even a character like Brother Yang couldn't defeat Zi Daoyang back then. Qin Wentian smiled as he replied. Zi Daoyang and Mo Xie's combat prowess is extremely terrifying. The competition in the Immortal Ascension rankings back then was simply too intense. Yang An calmly spoke, causing the interest of everyone to be piqued. Someone then added, sometimes, the rankings in the City of Ancient Emperors can't represent everything. For example, there would be clashes between experts, and there would be differences in the value of the rankings. That's true. Many people spoke. If the Crown Prince and Brother Qin were both in the City of Ancient Emperors, there would surely be a fierce battle between tigers and dragons. Someone intentionally added. No, how can I be compared to Brother Qin? Although the value of the rankings in my batch is very high, I'm still only ranked number 5. Yang An's words were humble, yet not humble at all. The value of the rankings in your batch is so low, yet you still think you're very high. You don't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Little Rascal was currently eating at the table as he spoke in a baby-like voice, causing everyone to be stunned as they turned their gazes onto him. Ha, this little fellow is simply too adorable. This pet actually knows how high the value of the rankings is. What a joke. When he was in the City of Ancient Emperors, Zi Daoyang was already the number 1 ranker. After that, Zi Daoyang, who cultivated for a few more years, was already ranked number 3. You guys are truly amusing. Little Rascal tossed a fruit into his mouth as he stared at everyone with disdain. Zi Daoyang was ranked number 3. Little fellow, you must be joking. Zi Daoyang is the son of the Violet Emperor, he would fall from number 1 to number 3 in the Immortal Ascension rankings. Even if Mo Xie surpassed him, Zi Daoyang should still be number 2, right? Yang An narrowed his eyes. I thought you were very humble. Little Rascal stared at Yang An with disdain. Would this Bao Bao lie to you? You can ask Qin Wentian. He heavily injured Zi Daoyang, and after that, Zi Daoyang was ranked number 3. You were ranked number 5 back then. If you didn't leave, you wouldn't even be in the top 10. Chapter 997. Everyone was stunned by Little Rascal's words. Even if Yang stayed behind, he wouldn't be able to enter the top 10. Qin Wendian defeated Zidi's son, Zi Daoyang. Although the spectators didn't have a very good understanding of Zi Daoyang, after all, the immortal realms were simply too vast, the various immortal emperors and emperors all had many descendants. However, they all knew of Zidi. In the boundlessly vast immortal realms, Zidi was a peak-level immortal emperor and was an extremely terrifying character. He cultivated many ultimate arts, and all of them were incomparably tyrannical. It was only normal that Zidi's son could become the top ranker in the Immortal Ascension rankings. Qin Wendian was able to defeat Zidi's son, Zi Daoyang. Wasn't this a little too much? Little Rascal is getting more and more adorable. He's even so good at bragging, a girl giggled. Brother Qin, this pet of yours is very interesting. Brother Qin, little brother Qin. At this moment, Yang also glanced over at Qin Wendian and smiled. Although Brother Qin is the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings and has extraordinary talent, and I, Yang, believe that Brother Qin's talent is unparalleled, I'm still very clear about Zi Daoyang. Back then, he was able to become the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings by relying on his true combat prowess and dual ultimate arts. If he didn't leave the city of ancient emperors, his dual ultimate arts would be as powerful as ascending the heavens. No matter how talented Brother Qin is, it's impossible for you to win against Zi Daoyang. Qin Wendian smiled as he glanced at Yang, and seems like Yang had seen Zi Daoyang fight before and knew how powerful Zi Daoyang was. Little Rascal loves to brag the moment he drinks. Prince, please don't take offense. Qin Wendian patted Little Rascal on its head. Little Rascal was currently using its claws to drink from the wine cup, and its drunken appearance was even more adorable. Upon hearing Qin Wendian's words, Little Rascal glanced at him in disdain before turning its gaze back to the spectators. Back then, this Bao Bao was only ranked number 7 on the Immortal Ascension rankings. Humph, Little Rascal tilted his head up proudly, as though he was a god. Brother Qin, I'm afraid your pet's mouth is even sharper than yours. Someone laughed, causing everyone else to laugh as well. Little guy, do you want my rock to play with you? That beautiful maiden patted the crimson blood rock beside her as she smiled. The crimson blood rock stared at Little Rascal as it let out a low roar. Yes, yes, this little fellow is too cute. Why don't we let our demonic beasts accompany it to play? Everyone laughed. Little Rascal's eyes gleamed as he cast a shifty glance at the demonic beasts. After which, he turned to Qin Wendian, causing Qin Wendian's eyes to flicker. He naturally understood that these people were up to no good, but Little Rascal's brain was also filled with evil thoughts. It wanted to eat the greater demons of the other party for a good meal. AI, this pet of mine has too many problems. He likes to brag and even likes to bite demonic beasts. It's best if we don't play around with him. If not, it wouldn't be good if he were to devour our demonic mounts. Qin Wendian waved his hands, politely rejecting. Don't worry about it. If Little Rascal really has the ability, it doesn't matter even if we let him bite us a few times. Yeah, if he has the ability, I'll accept it even if he wants to devour my mount. That maiden smiled. The crimson blood rock beside her let out a few screeches at Little Rascal, as though it was provoking him. Little Rascal had already transformed into a little demonic beast and was truly harmless. Regardless of humans or demonic beasts, they didn't know how powerful he was. That adorable appearance of his made them treat him as a pet. Let's chat again. Qin Wendian waved his hands. Ha, let's chat as we drink. Yang lifted his wine cup and stood up. This time around, I invited all my brothers and sisters here. I'm very happy that everyone could give me face. I, Yang, would like to toast to all of you. The Crown Prince of the Qi King is too polite. This time around, the Crown Prince has broken through to Immortal Foundation. This is truly a joyous occasion. let me toast to the Crown Prince first. That's right. Since ancient times, there have been many outstanding geniuses. But the Immortal Foundation realm is truly a hurdle. Even for those with outstanding talent, it's extremely tough to break through. Crown Prince, you have already broken through to Immortal Foundation in just a few short years. You are a chosen of the heavens and your glory is boundless. This isn't something that a peak ascendant at the celestial phenomenon realm can compare to. Now that you've stepped onto the immortal path, your life will definitely be filled with excitement. Someone pointed in the direction of Qin Wentian. Everyone, cheers. Yang An straightforwardly spoke. After that, he drained the wine in his cup in a single gulp. Everyone sat down respectively. The geniuses gathered together and chatted for a while. Naturally, it was inevitable for them to say a few words of flattery to each other. Qin Wentian would occasionally feel the gazes of the geniuses landing on him. Evidently, he was still a thorn in the hearts of many. In the vast royal palace, there were countless geniuses with nobility, yet Qin had chosen him. How could this not cause jealousy in the hearts of others? Elder brother Qin. At this moment, the crown prince of the Qi king, Yang An, stared at Qin Wentian as he raised his wine cup. Qin Wentian smiled and nodded, raising his cup as well. However, Yang An slowly spoke, I came out of seclusion yesterday and not only did I hear that elder brother Qin is the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings, you even defeated the geniuses of the royal palace and gained the favor of the princess. How envious. Crown Prince is too polite. Qin Wentian smiled. It's just that I also heard that elder brother Qin came from a particle world. To be able to achieve what you have today, it's truly praiseworthy. Yang An continued, as though he was praising Qin Wentian. However, he suddenly changed the topic and continued, however, elder brother Qin, have you ever considered the evergreen immortal emperor and the princess? Although elder brother Qin's talent is extremely dazzling, the path of cultivation isn't as simple as talent. The further you go, the more difficult it will be. The path to immortality is a threshold you have to cross, and you will have to face countless dangers. I'm sure elder brother Qin should understand this point, right? Qin Wentian smiled, declining to comment. Although Yang An's words were logical, his attitude was like a lecturing elder. It was as though he had stepped into the Immortal Foundation realm and was a tier higher than him. The princess is a precious princess, I'm afraid elder brother Qin won't be able to protect her safety. More importantly, you are not from the right family. Although the princess is loyal to elder brother Qin, disregarding everything, even disregarding her own reputation, and the evergreen immortal emperor dotes on Princess Qing, he also didn't blame elder brother Qin. However, if elder brother Qin truly cares about the princess, you shouldn't only think about yourself, right? Yang An continued, acting as though he was truly thinking for Qin Wentian and Qing, His words were filled with righteousness, and there were no flaws in his words. Qin Wentian didn't dare to directly refute him. Crown Prince, what do you think I should do? Qin Wentian smiled as he asked. Elder brother Qin, if you truly love the princess, you should leave her alone. In the future, if elder brother Qin truly has the ability to transcend the heavens, it wouldn't be too late for you to return. The wine cup in Yang An's hand was still raised as he slowly spoke. The banquet abruptly turned silent. Smiles could be seen in the eyes of everyone. It has finally come, this should be Yang An's true purpose. In the royal palace, it was no longer a secret that Yang An was in love with Princess Qing, Everyone knew about this. Qin Wentian placed his wine cup down. His eyelids drooped as a cold smile appeared on his face. He then spoke in a low voice, what status does Crown Prince have to use to persuade me? As he spoke, he slowly inclined his head and stared at Yang An, the matters between me and Qing, I don't think Crown Prince has the right to criticize me, right? Yang An's words were like needles hidden in silk floss, extremely sinister. If he truly loved Qing, he should leave her alone. In that case, if he refused to leave, it meant that he didn't love her but was greedy for power? Wanting to ascend to the heavens in a single step. Hee hee. Yang laughed, as if he didn't care about Qin Wentian's words. He then continued, I'm also thinking for the princess. If my words are too direct, I hope elder brother Qin won't take offense. Drink this as punishment. As he spoke, Yang drained the cup of wine in his hand. His demeanor was extraordinary. Elder brother Qin, Crown Prince Yang An's words don't make any sense. Someone laughed. Who doesn't know that Princess Qing is doted on by the great emperor? Marrying Princess Qing would be a great opportunity. At that time, elder brother Qin would have both status and talent. Isn't it making things difficult for elder brother Qin to think for the princess' sake? Someone laughed. Since Crown Prince Yang had started the conversation, Qin Wentian naturally couldn't be spared. Everyone's way of thinking has truly broadened my horizons. Qin Wentian faintly spoke. Nobility. So it turns out that pursuing the princess was only for the sake of her status. No wonder Qing was so disdainful towards all of you. What do you mean by that? Someone coldly asked. What do you think? Qin Wentian turned his gaze to the person who spoke. As expected, you are the same as that bastard. Your words are sharp. Another person emotionlessly spoke. You are the bastard. Your entire family is made up of bastards. Little rascal tilted its head in a drunken manner as it spoke to the person who spoke. The eyes of the young man narrowed as he stared at little rascal. Not only is this bastard stupid, he even knows how to curse. He simply doesn't know the immensity of death. I want to challenge you. Little rascal stretched out its paw and pointed at that person. You are courting death. That person waved his hand, and a moment later, a white tiger exuding a baleful aura appeared beside him. I can let my demonic beast accompany you to play. Little rascal, why are you joining in the fun? Qin Wentian hurriedly protected Qin Wentian. I want to challenge you. Little rascal mumbled. Ha, brother Qin, don't worry. I will only let my demonic beast mount accompany it to play. That young man laughed uproariously when he saw how Qin Wentian and little rascal were acting. Brother Qin, this pet is very adorable. Why don't you let these demonic beasts play with it? My demonic beast can go and play as well. Right, since we are feeling bored, why don't all of you let your demonic beasts spar and play with brother Qin's pet? Qin Wentian coldly laughed in his heart. These people sure changed their attitude quickly. Since this was the case, he would just play with them. Okay. Little rascal, go and play with these greater demonic beasts. Don't bite them. Qin Wentian was placed in a difficult position. Little rascal's chubby body leaped out and arrived at the public square in front of them. This Bao Bao will definitely let you all know how powerful I am. What an interesting little fellow. The others waved their hands as their demonic beasts flew over and hovered in the air, surrounding little rascal. It was as though they were really teasing a pet. The baleful aura of the white tiger towered up into the sky, its eyes flashing with an intense killing intent. Qin Wentian turned his gaze to the owner of the white tiger, the young man who spoke earlier. A cold light flickered in the eyes of the owner of the white tiger. Evidently, he wanted to kill little rascal. How could it be as simple as playing? Chapter 998. Qin Wentian stared at the demonic beasts surrounding little rascal as he sighed. Everyone, what's the point of doing this? These demonic beasts don't know any better, how can you injure them? Don't worry about it, let's play with brother Qin's pet. The owner of the white tiger laughed. This pet is simply too small. The sharp claws of my great rock can easily tear his head apart. That beautiful maiden shook her head. You bunch of idiots. Little rascal inclined his head and stared at the demonic beasts surrounding him as he cursed in a baby-like voice. Roar! The baleful aura of the white tiger towered up into the sky, it was extremely terrifying. Its sharp claws glowed with a baleful light that seemed capable of tearing apart everything. You scared me to death. Scram over here and receive your death. This Bao Bao wants to see how your tiger meat tastes. Little rascal stretched out his claws and pointed at the white tiger as he cursed. The white tiger let out a low-sounding roar as it ferociously dashed out. The baleful aura around it transformed into a terrifying tempest as its gigantic claws gleamed with an incomparably sharp light as they slashed towards Little Rascal. This strike was sufficient to rip apart Little Rascal's stomach. Qin Wentian narrowed his eyes when he saw this scene. A cold light flickered in his eyes as he transmitted a killing intent to Little Rascal. Roar! A heaven-shaking roar abruptly rang out, causing the hearts of the crowd to tremble. Everyone only saw Little Rascal's body abruptly expanding in size. Terrifying runic light circulated around him as his gigantic claws directly slammed out, shattering the white tiger's claws. His claws then clamped onto the head of the white tiger as a fearsome runic light flashed, transforming into a terrifying vortex. The white tiger's body trembled violently as it convulsed unceasingly, howling in pain. In just an instant, the body of the white tiger slammed into the ground, causing a rumbling sound to ring out as the white tiger's gigantic body lay there, unmoving. The gazes of the crowd froze. This sudden scene caused everyone to be stunned. It was hard to imagine that the seemingly harmless and baby-like Little Rascal would suddenly transform into a fiendish god, a primordial beast. "AI, didn't I already say not to spar? It would be bad if these demonic beasts were injured." Qin Wentian sighed. Everyone gritted their teeth when they saw the hypocritical look on his face. This bastard. Earlier, everyone thought that he was referring to injuring Little Rascal. Who would have thought that he was referring to injuring their demonic beasts? How preposterous. The other demonic beasts roared, they could feel the towering baleful aura from Little Rascal. They were like the king of beasts, hesitating to advance. A bright light flashed as Little Rascal's body transforming into a golden-winged great rock. Its golden wings fluttered as it shot towards the crimson blood rock like a bolt of lightning. The crimson blood rock's body trembled, a look of fear could be seen in its eyes. It also dashed out as its wings swept out. The two silhouettes collided like two bolts of lightning, so fast that the spectators couldn't even see what was happening. After that, the spectators only saw the crimson blood rock's wings shattering as the terrifying golden claws slammed into its head. The crimson blood rock twitched uncontrollably before falling to the ground, dead. Great rock. The countenance of that beautiful maiden drastically changed. She stood up, only to see her mount being killed on the spot. "Attack together!" Someone roared in a low voice. Momentarily, all the demonic beasts lunged out at the same time, killing their way towards Little Rascal. Little Rascal's speed was extremely fast, he soared up into the air, instantly widening the distance between him and the demonic beasts. All of a sudden, he turned and swooped downwards like a great rock. The runes of light on his wings were akin to the sharpest of golden blades. Swishing sounds rang out as those demonic beasts rushing towards him were directly sliced into pieces. Little Rascal's speed in the form of a golden-winged rock was simply too fast. He was like a true rock king, and the wings on his back were like true golden wings, indestructible. At the banquet, numerous figures stood up. Their countenances were all ashen. That bastard whom they had humiliated was simply too terrifying. He was invincible within the same cultivation level, just like Qin Wentian, exuding the demeanor of the top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings. "Everyone, I'm truly sorry. I've already said that we shouldn't spar. It wouldn't be good if our demonic beasts were to be injured, yet everyone insisted. I, Qin, have no way to reject this." Qin Wentian looked at everyone apologetically as he smiled. Everyone coldly stared at him, their gazes as sharp as blades. This bastard was really good at acting, he was simply smacking their faces. "Qin Wentian, you are truly impudent," the beautiful maiden coldly spoke. "This place is the Qi King Manor, yet you actually allowed your demonic beast to flaunt its might here and start a massacre. This vile beast is simply too lawless, he deserves death. Qin Wentian, why aren't you stopping that vile beast of yours? Tell him to roll over here and accept his death." Everyone stared at Qin Wentian as they coldly spoke. Qin Wentian's gaze abruptly turned sharp as he stared at everyone. Earlier, all of you were the ones who kept saying that you wanted to play with my demonic beast, right? I've always rejected you. Didn't someone personally say that if he was truly capable, he would swallow your demonic beast whole? But now, you're saying that I'm the one who's lawless and out of control. As he spoke, Qin Wentian stared at the young maiden. The one who spoke earlier was none other than her. You even treated my words as a joke so seriously. You actually dared to kill at the banquet? You truly don't have the nobility of our royal palace in your eyes, and you even insulted the crown prince of the Qi King manor. That maiden forcefully spoke, shifting the blame to Qin Wentian. Brother Qin, aren't you looking down on us a little too much by doing this? Although it's just a demonic beast, isn't your demonic beast slapping us in the face by slaughtering so many people? The master of the white tiger demonic beast also spoke coldly. For a moment, everyone was condemning Qin Wentian with their words and pen, as though Qin Wentian had done something that caused the wrath of the heavens and the people. He was an unpardonable evil, and they wanted to punish him on the spot. Ha ha ha. Qin Wentian suddenly laughed out loud. Immediately, everyone shut their mouths and looked at him. Their expressions were icy cold, and they were all enraged. Who was the one who said that he wanted his demonic beast to teach my companion a lesson? Who was the one who insulted him as an idiot who didn't know what was good for him? Who was the one who wanted to kill him? Now, your demonic beasts are just a bunch of trash, and my companion has all been killed. Everything that happened before has become a joke. This is the biggest joke in the world. Qin Wentian stood up and said proudly. His robe fluttered in the wind, and the wine glass in his hand fell to the ground, making a cracking sound and directly breaking into pieces. A bunch of sanctimonious people only know how to talk about nobility, but in fact, you are a bunch of incompetent trash. Pointing fingers at the matter between me and the princess, you are just a bunch of trash. Do you think you are worthy? Shameless people like you still need me to slap your faces? Do you have any shame? Qin Wentian's long-accumulated anger erupted in one move. He shouted incessantly, mocking and humiliating everyone. Today, he had come to the banquet to see what kind of tricks these people wanted to play. Since they were going to stir up trouble anyway, he might as well not tolerate it anymore. Qin Wentian, you. The woman's face turned green and white. She felt extremely angry, and the anger that had been suppressed in her chest could not be vented. What a bastard. Qin Wentian actually completely shed all pretense of cordiality and scolded them, the disciples of nobility, in this way. He was simply lawless. Shut up. Qin Wentian glanced at them. His gaze was extremely sharp, and his terrifying eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. He stared at the beautiful woman and said coldly, "You still have the face to speak. Just now, you were the one who shouted the loudest. As a daughter of nobility, you don't know how to behave yourself and act like a shrew. You have lost all the face of your elders. What a sharp-tongued guy. Qin Wentian, you really don't put the palace's nobility in your eyes at all." A person's aura surged and rushed out violently, sweeping towards Qin Wentian. So what if I have a sharp tongue? At least my talent and strength are good enough. A trash like you who only knows how to talk to me like this, and you even dare to say that I don't put nobility in my eyes. Do you even have nobility? A trash like you doesn't need me, Qin Wentian, to take nobility seriously. Not only are you slapping yourself in the face, you're also throwing away the face of nobility. If a trash like you dares to talk to me like this in the outside world, I'll slap you to death. Qin Wentian's voice was like thunder, and his roar was so loud that everyone in the Prince of Qi manor could probably hear it. Those people of nobility who were paying attention to this place must have seen everything that happened here. The person who was humiliated only felt his face turning red. He glared at Qin Wentian with a murderous gaze, and he almost coughed up a mouthful of blood. Qin Wentian's tongue was like a sword, scolding people until they went crazy. Qin Wentian, you've gone too far, that person bellowed in rage. A terrifying aura swept out, and a rumbling sound rang out. The table in front of him directly shattered. He took a step forward, and his aura was astonishing. He lifted his palm and directly smashed it towards Qin Wentian. In an instant, the heavens and earth rumbled, and an incomparably huge ferocious beast blotted out the sky and covered the earth as it rushed towards Qin Wentian. It was simply terrifying. I came here to attend the banquet, but you all kept on humiliating me. Now, you even want to kill me? You've gone too far, Qin Wentian roared, as if he wanted everyone to know that it was the other party who wanted to kill him. He lifted his palm, and runic light flashed. With a single palm strike, he directly smashed the huge ferocious beast into pieces. His palm flowed with an astonishing light as he directly grabbed towards the young man in the air. The young man roared and frenziedly attacked. However, this palm imprint was simply invincible. It instantly broke through everything, capable of plucking the stars, the sun, and the moon. When it landed on the young man's body, it directly grabbed him. Qin Wentian's other hand directly swung out. A loud smack rang out as a clear five-fingered imprint was imprinted on the young man's face. He directly slapped the young man, causing him to fall into a daze. At this moment, everyone's gazes were fixed on him, watching as he was slapped. Qing brought me to the royal palace as a guest, and now, she even came to attend the banquet in the King of Qi manor. Your disciple of nobility bullied me because I have no background and was alone, humiliating me. In order to protect myself, I can only retaliate. Qin Wentian roared, as though he had suffered a great grievance. Everyone was dumbfounded. The young man in the air was so infuriated by Qin Wentian's words that he coughed out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. He was grabbed by Qin Wentian and slapped in the air, humiliated to such an extent, yet Qin Wentian actually said that he was the one who had suffered a grievance and humiliation. Bang! Another loud sound rang out. Qin Wentian smashed the young man's body onto the ground. He coldly spoke, "A disciple like you has a sharp tongue, but your strength is so trashy. Yet, you still keep saying that nobility is a disgrace. I was forced to retaliate, and I believe that nobility won't blame me." The young man let out a low roar. He was heavily injured and had suffered such humiliation. Finally, he was so angry that he fainted. Chapter 999. Qin Wentian was infuriated. It was as though he wanted to cause a huge ruckus. Since he was in the royal palace, he could only endure as much as he could. However, these people were always targeting him. No matter what, there was no way he could endure it. Since these people wanted to cause trouble, he might as well make it bigger. What was there for him to fear? Everyone was stunned when they saw the enraged Qin Wentian. Indeed, Qin Wentian wasn't just good with words. His combat prowess was extremely strong as well. This point was once again proven by the blood of the young man lying on the ground. His status as the #1 ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings wasn't just for show. Such combat prowess was simply invincible within the same cultivation realm. Too arrogant. Qin Wentian, you are too impudent. That beautiful young woman was so angry that her body was trembling. This place was the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom, yet he actually dared to act so ruthlessly, lifting the young man up into the air and slapping him, ruthlessly humiliating him. You are the impudent one. Qin Wentian coldly stared at her as a terrifying light flickered in his eyes. If you want to attack, just scram the hell out. What's the point of trying to win with words? I can crush you with a single strike. You. The young woman was on the verge of exploding with rage. She clenched her fists tightly, yet she still endured. She knew that Qin Wentian was too powerful. He was the #1 ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings, and she wasn't a match for him. If you don't dare, just shut your mouth obediently. Other than calling yourself a disciple of nobility, what else do you have to use your nobility to suppress others? Qin Wentian coldly spoke. Even a clay figurine would have 3 points of fire. Before this, he had endured for so long, allowing these people to gang up on him and humiliate him. Now, it was time to let them know what sort of trash he was. Qin Wentian, you are too impudent. A low voice rang out. The gazes of the crowd turned to the silhouette of a young man who was still sitting there. This young man slowly stood up, a dazzling light flowed around his body, giving off an unfathomable feeling. That kind of light could be faintly seen radiating outwards, both internally and externally. This was immortal light. Immortal Foundation experts would have halos of light around them. This young man was clearly telling Qin Wentian that he was an Immortal Foundation expert. You finally can't take it anymore. Qin Wentian coldly laughed in his heart. The experts who came to attend the banquet today were all at the celestial phenomenon realm. Characters of this level posed no threat to him at all. These juniors of nobility naturally knew this in their hearts. They could only rely on words to deal with him. If they wanted to suppress him in terms of strength, they could only send out Immortal Foundation characters. Right now when he acted in rage, there was no one at Celestial Phenomenon who could block him. For the sake of face, these descendants of nobility could only send out Immortal Foundation experts to save the situation. However, he wanted to see what reason these people would use to deal with him. Today, no matter what he did, he had to firmly hold on to the word reason, making those elders of nobility have nothing to say. How am I presumptuous? Qin Wentian asked with a smile. Your demonic beast started a massacre, the crown prince of Qi King invited you to attend the banquet. Yet now, you ruined the banquet, heavily injuring people, putting everyone in your eyes and humiliating them. Isn't that presumptuous enough? That Immortal Foundation young man coldly spoke. At this moment, little rascal had already killed all the demonic beasts that wanted to deal with him. He reverted back to his chubby form and leaped to the side of Qin Wentian. He glared at the person who spoke. Do you have any shame? They were the ones who wanted to kill me. Could it be that I allowed them to kill this Bao Bao instead? Are you blind? Qin Wentian stared at him as he coldly spoke. They were the ones who started the demonic beast war. Earlier, who was the one who acted first? You were the one who spoke rudely. The young man coldly replied. Seems like not only are you blind, you are deaf as well. You can't even hear their words. So it turns out that I can't retort and can only allow them to humiliate me? They wanted to kill the demonic beasts, but I couldn't even resist when they acted. Today, my horizons have truly been broadened. Hee hee. That young man didn't seem to be angered. He merely laughed coldly. Right and wrong are clear to everyone here. There's no need for you to quibble. Brother Qin, I invited you to the banquet but I didn't expect you to be so overboard. To think that I respected you so much. You have truly disappointed me. The crown prince of the Qi King, Yang'an, also spoke, as though Qin Wentian had angered everyone. From the moment you arrived, they never intended to let you have a good time. Little rascal stared at Qin Wentian with disdain. Qin Wentian rapped little rascal on its head as he laughed. You are the smart one. After speaking, he turned his gaze to the others and clasped his hands behind his back as he spoke. Seems like I can only be beaten and scolded. If I retaliate, I'm already guilty. There's no need to say anything more. What do you guys want? Your actions have tarnished the nobility of the royal palace. Apologize to everyone here and leave the royal palace. This isn't a place for you to stay. The Immortal Foundation young man spoke. Apologize? What a joke. Qin Wentian had a mocking smile on his face. As for leaving the royal palace, why does it sound like the royal palace is your home? His Majesty didn't give the order and you guys are already trying to show off your might? Could it be that me staying in the princess residence has something to do with you guys? In that case, Brother Qin is ignoring our words. Immortal might gushed forth from the young man as the halo of light around him grew even more dazzling. Qin Wentian stared at him as he slowly spoke. Who the hell do you think you are? Do I, Qin, need to listen to your words? What a brazen fellow. I truly want to see what qualifications you have to be so brazen. That Immortal Foundation young man stepped out as a halo of light radiated from him. Boundless immortal might gushed forth, causing everyone in the surroundings to retreat. Only Qin Wentian stood there with his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the Immortal Foundation young man before him. Right now, he was already at the peak of celestial phenomenon and was preparing to establish his immortal foundation. Today's battle was a good opportunity for him to experience the strength of an immortal foundation expert. The people here were all experts of the younger generation. Although they were immortal foundation characters, their cultivation bases weren't too high. Most probably, they were at the initial phase of immortal foundation and were extremely suitable to temper themselves. The Immortal Foundation young man walked closer and closer to Qin Wentian. The eyes of everyone sharpened as they stared ahead. Qin Wentian's aura grew more and more majestic, as though there were waves of tempestuous waves contained within his body. This caused the countenances of everyone to change unceasingly. This Qin Wentian's strength was truly powerful. His current state was simply too terrifying. That might he exuded was sufficient to crush all celestial phenomenon ascendants. Just by relying on such might, even celestial phenomenon ascendants wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike from him. The Immortal Foundation young man's palm circulated with law energy as immortal light flashed. The law energy of immortals was a type of transformation energy that was incomparably profound. Every strand of energy contained a terrifying might and was on a completely different level compared to celestial phenomenon ascendants. Immortals could easily insta-kill celestial phenomenon ascendants. Boom! The Immortal Foundation expert stepped out. Qin Wentian only felt a terrifying force directly blasting into his body. This formless might was none other than the might of an Immortal Foundation expert. Qin Wentian didn't dare to be careless. The energy in his body gushed forth to the extreme as he executed his battle art. Boundless runic light shone around him, as though he had an indestructible body. Clad in platinum armor, he resembled a supreme god of war. Rumble. Qin Wentian's body grew gigantic. His robes were tattered as runic light shone from his body. His body was over 10 meters in size, resembling an infant fiend god. You actually want to fight against an Immortal Foundation expert? You overestimate your own capabilities. I will make you understand that the might of an Immortal Foundation isn't something celestial phenomenon ascendants can defend against. The Immortal Foundation young man stepped out once more as the might of his Immortal Foundation blasted into Qin Wentian's heart once more, wanting to shatter Qin Wentian's meridians and heart. Qin Wentian's heart pounded violently. That formless might was akin to the might of the heavens and earth, directly blasting into his heart. If it wasn't for his surging vitality and his powerful physique, even the formless might of an Immortal Foundation expert would be able to injure him. His palms transformed as a fearsome runic light circulated around them. The terrifying runes exuded a fearsome might, causing the countenances of the experts in the surroundings to change. They stared at Qin Wentian's palms. These hands were so terrifying, they gave off a feeling that there was nothing they couldn't overcome. It was as though when these hands slammed down, they could destroy everything. A fearsome demonic might enveloped Qin Wentian. A silhouette of a gigantic elephant appeared on Qin Wentian's body. There were boundless particles of light within that gigantic elephant, flowing around Qin Wentian's body. Each and every particle contained a fearsome might of a gigantic elephant, terrifying to the extreme. The might of a dragon and elephant. The power of a dragon and an elephant was extremely strong. The ancient demonic divinity, the Dracophant, had enough strength to shatter the dome of the heavens. The Immortal Foundation young man could sense that Qin Wentian's strength was growing stronger and stronger. In fact, Qin Wentian even felt a trace of threat towards him. With a cold snort, he finally acted. Punching out with a simple and unadorned punch, it actually contained the might of an Immortal Foundation. The terrifying might engulfed the heavens and earth as the law energy within transformed into a golden fist that pierced through space. Terrifying fist shadows circulated in the surroundings and in an instant, the entire space was filled with the power of the fist, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Each of the fist shadows was strong enough to kill a peak-level celestial phenomenon ascendant, let alone the meteor fist that was imbued with the power of the meteor fist. As expected of an Immortal Foundation expert. If I was in there, I would be killed easily. Ascending to immortality with a single step, stepping into the immortal realm. He's on a completely different level compared to the celestial phenomenon realm. In the time it took for sparks to fly off a flint, numerous thoughts flashed through the minds of everyone. Qin Wendian didn't retreat. He similarly punched out with the god's hand. The trumpeting of an elephant shook the heavens as a gigantic elephant appeared before him. In fact, each and every particle Qin Wendian blasted out transformed into an indomitable gigantic elephant, possessing supreme might that could shake the heavens and earth. The two forces clashed in the air, causing an earth-shattering collision. The tables and chairs between them were all reduced to dust, not even a scrap was left behind. A gust of astral wind gusted out, causing the people around them to feel their bodies being torn apart as they hurriedly retreated far away from the battlefield. Boom! The deafening sound of collision shook the heavens and earth. The two of them clashed in the most violent manner possible, and at this instant, Qin Wendian and the Immortal Foundation young man were both forced back by the tyrannical might of their opponent. The Immortal Foundation young man froze. His attack was actually blocked. He was an Immortal Foundation expert, someone who could easily kill celestial phenomenon ascendants. Yet, he was actually forced back. The spectators were all stunned as they stared at the godlike figure of Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian stood there arrogantly, staring ahead as he icily spoke, "You only have this level of strength after stepping into the Immortal Foundation realm? How ironic, you are nothing more than trash. If I was an Immortal Foundation expert, killing you would be as easy as slaughtering pigs or dogs." Chapter 1000. His arrogant voice rang out through the air. The banquet had already been completely destroyed. In the center of the crowd, the two of them stood facing each other, exuding an incomparably ferocious aura. This strike truly made them feel how powerful Qin Wendian was. Fighting against an Immortal Foundation expert while at the celestial phenomenon realm, how glorious was this? In addition, Qin Wendian didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Although he was forced back, his opponent was also forced back a few steps. Just this strike alone gave him the qualifications to be arrogant. Immortal Foundation experts were existences who had established their immortal foundations and could control law energy. Every attack they made contained true law energy, possessing boundless might. Stepping into the Immortal Foundation realm from celestial phenomenon was a qualitative change, impossible to surpass. No matter how outstanding a celestial phenomenon ascendant was, they wouldn't be able to win against an Immortal Foundation expert. In fact, they might even be insta-killed. This was the common understanding of cultivators. But at this moment, Qin Wendian seemed to have broken this common understanding, shocking everyone. His palms are too terrifying. Also, the power of that innate technique contained law energy as well. Unleashed by a divine elephant, it possesses boundless might. The hearts of everyone mused as they stared fixedly at Qin Wendian's god's hand. What kind of power was this exactly to be able to clash against an Immortal Foundation expert? What innate technique is that? That Immortal Foundation young man asked, staring at Qin Wendian's palms. Regardless of his palms or the divine elephant technique earlier, both were extremely terrifying. It was definitely a type of supremely powerful innate technique. This Immortal Foundation young man was named Mu Feng. He was a descendant of a conferred king-level character. His talent was outstanding and he had already established his Immortal Foundation for a period of time. His Immortal Foundation was extremely stable and he was extremely arrogant, wanting to teach Qin Wendian a lesson, forcing Qin Wendian to apologize and leave the royal palace. Yet with a single strike, he was actually forced back by Qin Wendian, losing all his face. "You aren't worthy to know." Qin Wendian laughed. "I've already broken through to Immortal Foundation, there's no need for me to use any innate techniques to kill you. You actually have the face to say that you want to blame it on an innate technique? This group of people are all so shameless. Celestial phenomenon ascendants can't ascend to Immortal Foundation. Don't be like what you said the other day. If they still can't do it, they will call for their parents and beg for their grandpa and grandma." Little Rascal, who was behind Qin Wendian, spoke in a baby-like voice, smacking the faces of everyone present. Inviting Qin Wendian to attend the banquet, it was clear that so many people wanted to target Qin Wentian. But as celestial phenomenon ascendants, none of them could do anything to him. Hence, the Immortal Foundation experts acted against him. This by itself was already in the wrong, not to mention that this place was the royal palace of the Immortal Empire. Brother Qin, this bastard's mouth is too stinky. Shouldn't you discipline him? The heir of the Prince of Qi, Yang'an, coldly spoke. Now that he was riding a tiger, it was impossible to back down. How impressive! Little rascal's childish voice rang out once more. He stared at Yang'an as he continued, the fifth-ranked genius of the Immortal Ascension rankings, Zi Daoyang is like a divinity in your eyes. You admit that you are inferior, but you still think that others are inferior as well? The person Qin Wentian defeated was Zi Daoyang, who cultivated for several years after you left. To think that you still dared to act so complacently in front of us, thinking that I'm bragging. If this Bao Bao was you, I would have already committed suicide in shame. Little rascal, leave some face for others. After all, they are all descendants of nobility and have lofty statuses. Although they are trash, their statuses are enough to suppress you to death. Qin Wentian patted little rascal on its head, completely ignoring the experts in the surroundings. Do you really think you can stand against Immortal Foundation experts? Before this, Brother Mu was merely playing around with you. If Brother Qin insists on going about things the wrong way, I'm afraid Brother Qin will have to experience the true might of an Immortal Foundation expert. Yang An's aura gushed forth as a terrifying immortal might gushed forth from him. It contained supreme might, terrifying to the extreme. Are you guys planning to come at me together? Qin Wentian mockingly laughed. You are too arrogant. Just you alone is enough. Mu Feng coldly spoke. The might radiating from him grew even more tyrannical as a glass-like glow circulated around him. Faintly, a rumbling sound could be heard from his Immortal Foundation as a bright light flashed in the sky. Qin Wentian saw a constellation in the sky. At that moment, a gigantic golden fist could be seen, towering over the heavens. No, this wasn't a constellation. It was an evolution of a constellation and its might was many times stronger compared to a normal constellation. It was a qualitative change, akin to an immortal constellation. That flowing fist light resembled a meteor shower, shimmering with boundless runic light. That meteor fist contained immortal law energy, as well as immortal might. Immortal Foundation experts have already established an immortal foundation in their bodies. Their constellations would undergo a transformation and they would be able to directly absorb the law energy from the constellations in their bodies, strengthening their immortal foundation, causing their immortal phenomenon to transform unceasingly, eventually transforming into a supreme law energy. Qin Wentian stared at his immortal phenomenon, sensing the energy contained within. This time around, fighting against an Immortal Foundation expert was considered an experience for him. Only to see Mu Feng stretching his hands out. Instantly, his arms transformed into the arms of an immortal, fusing together with the immortal constellation in the air, allowing him to better utilize the energy in the air. He punched out once more, piercing through the heavens and earth. Although he was standing at his original location, there was still an immortal fist that blasted towards Qin Wentian. When Immortal Foundation experts acted, they could easily kill people 100 miles away. Qin Wentian's aura gushed forth ferociously. He stepped out, causing the heavens and earth to tremble as he punched out once more. A divine elephant suppressed the heavens and earth, exuding a towering demonic might. The light in the air collided unceasingly, the destructive might contained within was terrifying to the extreme. Mu Feng's countenance was incredibly unsightly to behold. Both his fists radiated a fearsome might as they blasted out together. The light radiating from his body grew even more resplendent as an immortal foundation shimmered in and out of existence, radiating boundless immortal light that enveloped him. Energy circulated around his fists, causing Mu Feng to be bathed in true immortal light. Each and every one of his attacks shook the heavens and earth, exuding an unstoppable might. Both of Qin Wentian's hands transformed into God's hands. This was the first time he used both of his hands together to attack, depleting his energy. If it wasn't for the fact that he had multiple palaces and the boundless astral energy in his body, there was no way he would be able to support such a tyrannical battle. How terrifying was the might of God's hands, able to clash head-on against an immortal foundation expert. The impact of the collision caused the sky to change color as the spectators in the surroundings retreated again and again. Qin Wentian was simply too powerful, possessing a perfect physique. His fleshly body was like an indestructible body, flowing with boundless light, comparable to fiend gods. His attacks shook the heavens and earth, resisting immortal might. Evidently, Qin Wentian's attacks also contained law energy. As an expert of his level, it was impossible for him not to have comprehended law energy. However, it was impossible for celestial phenomenon ascendants to directly absorb immortal energy like immortal foundation experts. Even if celestial phenomenon ascendants comprehended law energy, there was a limit to how much they could comprehend. The immortal foundation created by an immortal foundation expert was filled with immortal might, possessing boundless might. If the battle dragged on, no matter how powerful Qin Wentian was, he would still be defeated without a doubt. But even so, Qin Wentian was already sufficiently proud. At the very least, he had truly used his strength to intimidate these disciples of nobility, letting them truly feel the disparity between them and him. The top ranker of the Immortal Ascension rankings in the City of Ancient Emperors had defeated Zi Daoyang. Right now, they no longer doubted him. Qin Wentian, are these all your trump cards? Mu Feng coldly spoke, continuing his attacks. An Immortal Foundation expert actually dares to speak arrogantly when fighting against a celestial phenomenon ascendant? I truly feel sad for you, Qin Wentian domineeringly replied. The two of them fought from the ground to the air. AI, how embarrassing. I still thought that Immortal Foundation experts were so amazing. Little rascal inclined his head and sighed, looking extremely adorable. However, numerous cold gazes landed on him, as though he couldn't tolerate him. What do you guys want? Little rascal noticed the unfriendly gazes of the crowd. His body expanded in size as he spoke. If there's anyone who wishes to have a fair battle with me on the same level, this Bao Bao is more than willing to accompany you. Vile creature, who would have the time to fight with you? I was the one who organized the banquet, yet you swallowed all my demonic beasts. Since this is the case, take your life as compensation. The eyes of the crown prince of the Qi King, Yang'an, flickered with coldness as he stepped forward. You want to use your immortal foundation to bully celestial phenomenon ascendants again? Little rascal transformed into a golden-winged great rock and floated in the air, staring at Yang'an with a sharp gaze. Yang'an's gaze was terrifying, flickering with killing intent. He had always been interested in Qing, and wanted to woo her. Today, he invited Qin Wentian here because he wanted to humiliate him and force him to retreat. However, in the end, Qin Wentian caused such a huge commotion at the banquet and no one was able to suppress him, fighting against an Immortal Foundation expert. Yang'an, who was ranked number 5 on the Immortal Ascension rankings, wasn't even worthy of a mention. Even though he had broken through to the Immortal Foundation realm, he didn't have anything to be proud of. This caused him to feel extremely unhappy in his heart. Given the talent Qin Wentian displayed, as well as the fact that he was doted on by the princess, everyone in the royal palace should have seen the commotion today. Most probably, it would be very difficult for him to compete against Qin Wentian. Yang'an was an intelligent man. Although Qin Wentian had always said that he had no background, it was clear that there were still immortal kings who regarded him highly. If not, he wouldn't have been able to go to the City of Ancient Emperors. However, a mere immortal king wouldn't be able to stand out in the royal palace. Hence, it was very normal for Qin Wentian to not say anything. But with Qin Wentian's talent, after he stepped into the Immortal Foundation realm, he might be able to find an even more powerful backer in the future. This caused Yang'an to feel jealousy in his heart. Was Princess Qing'er destined to be with him? But since he lost face today, he had to make Qin Wentian pay the price no matter what. Time to go. Little rascal suddenly transformed into a golden bolt of lightning, soaring through the air. He knew that Yang'an's killing intent had been triggered. If he wanted to fight against an Immortal Foundation expert, he truly had no confidence. do you think you can escape? Yang stepped out, his entire body radiating immortal light as his immortal foundation radiated immortal might. His entire body was shrouded in law energy as he soared through the air like the wind, chasing after little rascal. Boom! A terrifying storm of immortal might engulfed everything, instantly enveloping this entire space. Little rascal halted his steps as he stared at the terrifying storm of immortal law energy around him. Yang radiated fearsome law energy. His talent was even more outstanding compared to Mu Feng. Although he had just stepped into the immortal foundation realm, he wasn't in any way inferior to Mu Feng. Die! Yang coldly snorted. The boundless law runes within the storm transformed into thin wind blades that could slice apart space, slashing towards Little Rascal with boundless might. Little Rascal revolved as a golden light radiated from him, enveloping him completely. That sharp wind blade actually had no way to break through his defense. After which, Little Rascal soared up into the air as the terrifying golden storm of wind annihilated everything, wanting to rush out from Yang storm. What a powerful defense! The killing intent in Yang eyes grew even more intense. He couldn't kill Qin Wentian, this vile creature had to die here today. Chapter 1001. Yang stared at the revolving golden-winged rock as killing intent flashed in his eyes. Boundless immortal law energy circulated within his body as a terrifying tempest coalesced together, transforming into a heaven-shaking saber. This saber slashed through the air, exuding an indomitable might. If this saber slashed out, the might it could unleash would be unimaginably terrifying. Yang brandished the long saber in his hand. His silhouette was like the wind as he instantly appeared before Little Rascal, slashing out with his saber. This saber strike contained a terrifying might, capable of cleaving apart everything. Little Rascal could feel the danger it was in. It soared through the 9 heavens as its golden wings transformed into countless golden swords that shot out frenziedly, yet they were all shattered by the saber light. With a loud roar, Little Rascal reverted to his true form, resembling a supreme demon king. His sharp claws slashed out, radiating a towering might. A formless barrier of light enveloped his body, and as the saber slashed down, cracking sounds rang out as the barrier of light shattered. Little Rascal frantically retreated, only to see the saber light sweeping out like a bolt of lightning, directly arcing through the air. Fresh blood splattered as the golden body of Little Rascal was shattered into pieces. The immortal might was simply too powerful. From very far away, Qin Wentian saw that Yang was currently dealing with Little Rascal. He frenziedly moved over, unleashing towering palm imprints with God's hand, shattering everything. However, Mu Feng couldn't do anything even after a long time. How could he allow Qin Wentian to leave the battlefield? That would be a humiliation to him. Little Rascal. Qin Wentian naturally saw Yang attacking Little Rascal. His eyes burned with terrifying flames of rage. When Mu Feng's meteor fist blasted over, Qin Wentian roared in rage. An immortal-ranked long spear appeared in his god's hand. The long spear expanded in size, directly penetrating through Mu Feng's immortal fist, aiming for his opponent's body. Mu Feng frantically retreated. Qin Wentian soared through the air, directly moving towards the other battlefield. At this moment, Little Rascal was slashed by a saber light as fresh blood splattered through the air. Qin Wentian's overwhelming might gushed forth as the might of his god's hand was unleashed to the maximum. Yang slashed out with his saber again, continuing to attack Little Rascal. However, a thunderous roar rang out as he felt an intense sense of danger. Turning his body, he only saw an immortal-ranked long spear that was several hundred meters long, piercing through space, directly piercing towards him. This spear strike was as fast as lightning, containing a fearsome might. Yang turned and slashed out with his saber, slashing towards Qin Wentian's spear. Their attacks collided, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. The spear was like a hot knife through butter, shattering apart the saber formed from law energy. The law energy of the spear enveloped Yang, causing Yang body to shift. Boom! Qin Wentian soared through the air, directly moving to the side of Little Rascal. His cold eyes stared at Yang An as he spoke, Evergreen Kingdom Palace, disciples of nobility. Today, I, Qin, have truly witnessed your shamelessness. This is truly an eye-opener. Mu Feng and Yang An each stood in the air. Both of their expressions were extremely unsightly to behold. They were both Immortal Foundation characters, and if an Immortal Foundation expert acted, they would already be in the wrong. But now, they actually failed to capture this man and demonic beast. What was laughable was that so many people were clearly targeting Qin Wentian, yet they were the ones who were humiliated by Qin Wentian instead. I, Qin Wentian, have experienced enough of this banquet. Farewell. Qin Wentian and Little Rascal were preparing to leave. However, Yang An coldly spoke, "You want to leave just like that? You invited me here to participate in this banquet. Isn't this already enough? Do you still want me, Qin Wentian, to leave my life behind?" Qin Wentian stared at Yang An. Killing intent had already appeared in his heart. Before this, although these disciples of nobility were jealous of him and had prejudice against him, he could still understand it. But now, these people seemed to have crossed the line, causing killing intent to appear in his heart. You caused such a ruckus at the banquet, completely disregarding the nobility of the royal palace. Without giving an explanation, you want to leave. Right now, Yang An was already riding a tiger, it was hard for him to dismount. There was a devil in his heart, he had no way to swallow this anger. When he first broke through to Immortal Foundation, he initially thought that he would be able to shine brightly, and after he came out of seclusion, he heard news of Qing'er and Qin Wentian. Hence, he invited Qin Wentian over, wanting to kill him a little to make him retreat. But who would have thought that Qin Wentian would cause such a ruckus? Right now, he didn't dare to allow Qin Wentian to swagger his way out like that. Qin Wentian laughed uproariously. He stared at Yang An and pointed the spear in his hand at him as he coldly spoke, "Yang An, this is the royal palace of an immortal empire. I don't wish to be too ruthless. If not, who do you think you are? Do you really think you can make me stay behind and even want me to give you an explanation? Ridiculous to the extreme. Are you even worthy? How would you know if you don't try?" Yang An's expression grew increasingly sinister. Try. Qin Wentian inclined his head and stared at the air. I know there are many seniors in the royal palace watching this. I'm sure everyone here is clearer than me on what is right and what is wrong. The disciples of nobility have gone too far, Qin, have already endured it. If the Qi King Manor doesn't send someone to stop Yang An from seeking his own humiliation and still insist on forcing me to stay behind, I would really treat this as a life-and-death battle. Qin Wentian's arrogant words caused everyone in the surroundings to stare dumbfoundedly. Too arrogant, Qin Wentian was simply brazen to the extreme. If the Qi King Manor didn't send someone to stop Yang An, could he really take Yang An's life? Most probably, Yang An wouldn't be able to swallow this anger. After all, this place was the Qi King Manor. And as expected, after Yang An heard Qin Wentian's words, immortal might gushed forth violently from him, terrifying to the extreme. His aura churned intensely as he stared at Qin Wentian. How would he be willing to give up? I truly want to see how you want to fight to the death with me. Yang An's silhouette flickered as an immortal weapon appeared in his hand. It was a saber, an incomparably sharp saber. The saber light radiating from the saber radiated an intense coldness that seemed capable of killing. Let's go. Qin Wentian kept his spear. With his back facing Yang An, a sword appeared in his right hand. The demon's sword sliced through his palm as his blood seeped into it. The demon's sword hummed as a terrifying demonic might gushed forth, engulfing the heavens and earth. At the same time, Qin Wentian clenched his left fist. It was the wind rock rune bone, and in an instant, Qin Wentian's body seemed to be transforming into a true rock. How arrogant! Yang An's body was like the wind as he rushed out with inconceivable speed. But at the same time, Qin Wentian's silhouette vanished from sight. In the air, numerous afterimages of great rocks appeared as the wind whistled, terrifying to the extreme. Yang An halted his steps. His long saber slashed out, but he only managed to slash the afterimages. Yang An released his immortal sense. There was no one there, only a great rock. Qin Wentian seemed to have transformed into a rock. Even his sword intent had disappeared. The demon's sword also transformed into a rock. In this space, there was only a rock. How fast! Everyone inclined their heads and stared at the sky. The speed was so fast that they couldn't see anything clearly. Only wind rocks could be seen revolving around Yang An. Yang An lifted his saber as boundless law energy enveloped him, guarding against Qin Wentian's sneak attack. Bzzz, bzzz. Countless great rocks swooped down, transforming into countless afterimages as they rushed towards Yang An. Yang An roared in rage as the might of his immortal foundation erupted forth. His law energy transformed into a tempest that soared up into the clouds, wanting to destroy everything. Rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly. At this instant, Qin Wentian had already launched his attack. The wind rocks continued to attack unceasingly, exuding terrifying might. A wind rock that was faster than the wind rushed towards Yang An, directly passing through the gaps between the attacks. Yang An's eyes suddenly refracted a sword light, and his expression changed drastically. His sword hummed, and the sword light was like a wash as it flashed past. Puchi! A light sound rang out as fresh blood spurted out. The crowd only saw the silhouette of a great rock descending from the sky. After that, this great rock took on the form of a human, and it was none other than Qin Wentian using the fiend transformation art. Yang An clutched his throat with both hands, his countenance was as pale as paper. He stared fixedly at Qin Wentian as the long saber in his hand fell to the ground. This scene was shocking to the eyes and heart. Yang An at the Immortal Foundation realm, the crown prince of the Qi King, was insta-killed by a celestial phenomenon ascendant like Qin Wentian with a single sword strike. Boom! A terrifying might bore down as several silhouettes appeared at the same time. One of them landed beside Yang An as a powerful immortal light enveloped him. After that, that person fed a medicinal pill into Yang An's mouth. The wound on Yang An's throat rapidly healed as the fresh blood stopped flowing. Qin Wentian wasn't surprised by this scene. This place was the Qi King Manor. That sword strike wouldn't be able to claim the life of an Immortal Foundation expert like Yang An. Not long after, Yang An's wounds were completely healed. His eyes were filled with a sinister light as he stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. Ridiculous! Qin Wentian laughed mockingly. Such a smile caused Yang An to be even more infuriated. Little fellow, you have guts. An imposing middle-aged man stared at Qin Wentian as coldness flickered in his eyes. This man was none other than the immortal king of the Qi King Manor, and his strength was extremely terrifying. In the end, he was still a little too cowardly. If not, that sword strike would have killed him instantly. However, Senior still has to discipline him properly. For someone like him, he wouldn't be able to survive for more than a few days in the outside world. He wouldn't even know how he died. If we weren't in the Qi King Manor today, he would already be a dead man. Qin Wentian mocked, not even bothering to glance at Yang An. Yang An clenched his fists tightly as the killing intent in his eyes grew even more terrifying. The hearts of the spectators below trembled. Everything that happened today had already exceeded their expectations. Clearly, they didn't expect Qin Wentian to be so domineering and tyrannical. They understood that after this battle, Qin Wentian would become Yang An's heart demon. His hatred for Qin Wentian would seep into his bones. If he didn't kill Qin Wentian, he would never be able to forget the humiliation he suffered today. Hee hee. That immortal king laughed. Shouldn't your elders properly discipline you? It's not a good thing for you to be so arrogant. Could it be that the elders of the Qi King Manor want to act against me as well? Qin Wentian laughed. Although you are a friend of the princess, if the Qi King Manor wants to use their personal grudges to teach you a lesson, I'm afraid no one would be able to help you. That immortal king laughed. Although Yang An's performance today was somewhat unsightly, he was still the crown prince of the Qi King Manor after all. This Qin Wentian was a character, but he was too arrogant, causing the Qi King Manor to lose face. He truly wanted to see how gutsy Qin Wentian was. I advise Senior not to do such a thing. Qin Wentian laughed. If this has nothing to do with the Qi King Manor, I'm afraid your Qi King Manor wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Chapter 1002. Qin Wentian's calm voice rang out. His tone was even more arrogant compared to before. Could the Qi King Manor afford this price? How arrogant was this? The Qi King Manor was one of the most powerful kings in the Evergreen Kingdom Palace. Experts were as common as the clouds, and there were quite a few immortal kings among them. Any army they sent out was sufficient to suppress the entire region and become the king. The eyes of the disciples of nobility froze as they stared at Qin Wentian. Today at the banquet, they finally got to know this man whom Princess Qing'er loved. He was incomparably arrogant, his arrogance towered up into the sky, unwilling to lower his head and willing to disregard everything. He fought against Immortal Foundation experts at the Celestial Phenomenon realm, killing Yang'an with a single sword strike. What a terrifying character. And now, even when facing an immortal king, he wasn't willing to show any weakness and even retorted. In fact, with a single sentence, he even wanted to offend the entire Qi King Manor. These disciples of nobility all admitted that they didn't have such courage and charisma. That immortal king from the Qi King Manor stared at Qin Wentian. His eyes seemed to be able to see through everything, wanting to see through Qin Wentian. After that, he spoke, "Who are you exactly? From your words, the person who sent you to the city of ancient emperors shouldn't be just an immortal king, right? Who is it has nothing to do with you. If you want to know, you can investigate it yourself." Qin Wentian coldly spoke. It wasn't difficult to find out that he had the Emperor Qianbian behind him. Many people in the Eastern Ascension 13 prefectures should know about this. Even those who paid attention to the Dongshengshan Gate would know about the battle at the Dongshengshan Gate back then. It was just that the immortal realms were simply too vast. The Evergreen Kingdom wasn't the Eastern Ascension 13 prefectures after all. Although Qin Wentian caused some commotion in the 13 prefectures, his fame wasn't strong enough to spread all the way to the Evergreen Kingdom. Only peak-level existences, immortal emperors, would be able to do so. Even immortal kings didn't have such qualifications. After all, in the vast immortal realms, there were simply too many immortal kings. You didn't say that on purpose, right? Mu Feng coldly asked. Qin Wentian glanced at him and said sarcastically, "Do you think I'm the same as you? You're so useless that you only care about your identity as a disciple of nobility. Other than that, you're worthless. Not to mention disciples of nobility, I've also killed the descendants and disciples of immortal emperors. If you were outside, you would already be dead. I hope you'll remember today's lesson. Otherwise, you won't live long." After speaking, Qin Wentian turned and departed with Little Rascal by his side. A human and a demonic beast walked out of the Qi King Manor. "Uncle, are we just going to let him go like this?" Prince Qi's crown Prince Yang An's face was ashen as he asked indignantly. "You want to kill him?" "Sure." The immortal king at the side glanced at Yang and started as his expression turned unsightly to behold. That immortal king impolitely continued, "You are at the Immortal Foundation realm while he is at the Celestial Phenomenon realm. If you can't kill him, what qualifications do you have to leave him alive? I can't afford to lose this face." After speaking, that immortal king flicked his sleeves and directly departed. Arg! Yang stared at the departing back of Qin Wentian as he let out a roar of unwillingness. Humiliation, anger. From today onwards, he was no longer the number 5 ranker on the Immortal Ascension rankings. Instead, he was nailed to the pillar of shame by Qin Wentian. Everyone who saw him, Yang'an, would think of the battle today. The humiliation of that sword strike would forever follow him. "If you want revenge, you better cultivate well." A voice drifted over. Yang'an clenched his fists tightly. Everyone below fell silent. They knew that the immortal king wanted to use today's matter to motivate Yang would either be plagued by his heart demons and be unable to recover, or he would go crazy and become even stronger. Today was a tempering experience for Yang and similarly, it was also a tempering experience for everyone else. So what if Qin Wendian was a descendant of nobility? There were so many descendants of nobility, and there were even immortal foundation experts present. Yet, they were all smacked in the face by an outsider, ruthlessly humiliating everyone. During today's banquet, they became a foil for Qin Wendian. Similarly, they also served as foils for Princess Qing Er's judgment. Why didn't Princess Qing Er choose a descendant of nobility? Why didn't she care about Yang'an, the crown prince of the Qi king? Why did she bring Qin Wendian to the royal palace? There was no other reason other than because Qin Wendian was more outstanding compared to them. They initially wanted to humiliate Qin Wendian, forcing Qin Wendian to retreat in the face of difficulties. Yet, it was the opposite of what they wanted. Instead, they helped Qin Wendian to shine even more brilliantly. The matter today was enough to be engraved in their hearts. However, Qin Wendian didn't care about their feelings. He carried Little Rascal in his arms and returned to the Princess Changping residence. Princess Changping and the Scarlet Eye Marquis were waiting for him. Smiles appeared in their eyes when they saw him returning. Awesome. Seems like that last Qing Er's judgment isn't bad. Princess Changping smiled as she stared at Qin Wendian. Evidently, she already knew what happened earlier. Not only her, there were many experts from the nobility manor in the royal palace who had witnessed what happened at the banquet. This battle should be able to shut up many people. If you aren't worthy, their descendants are even more so. The Scarlet Eye Marquis laughed heartily. His horizons were truly broadened today. Usually, immortal kings like them wouldn't interfere in the matters of the juniors and wouldn't be too interested in them. Usually, they couldn't be bothered to interfere, even if there were conflicts between juniors. However, the matter between Qin Wendian and Princess Qing had caused an earthquake in the royal palace. Hence, many people paid attention to it. Who would have thought that this would give them such a pleasant surprise, allowing them to watch a good show? It was very rare for a battle between juniors to be so fascinating. Marquis praises me too much. Qin Wendian humbly replied. Qing Er walked to the side of Qin Wendian and asked, "Are you all right?" Qin Wendian nodded, "It's just that Little Rascal was injured. That fellow Yang'an actually acted to deal with him." Little Rascal stretched his head out and pouted at Qing Er, appearing extremely adorable. "It's just a minor injury, don't worry about it." Qing Er rubbed Little Rascal's chubby body. Princess Changping then asked, "What demonic beast is this little fellow? He looks harmless but is actually so tyrannical." "Who knows?" Qin Wendian shrugged. "All right, the two of you have a good chat. We won't disturb you any longer. After this matter, you two should be able to enjoy some peace." Princess Changping and the Scarlet Eye Marquis left. Qing Er and Qin Wendian returned to their courtyard. In the royal palace, a huge commotion arose. Many nobility experts started to investigate Qin Wendian. He said that he had killed the descendants and disciples of immortal emperors before. Was this true? What sort of person was Qin Wendian exactly? In the royal palace, voices of support for Qin Wendian began to circulate. They said that Yang'an and the others had thrown away the face of the Celestial Empire's nobility manor. No wonder Princess Qing Er would choose Qin Wendian. It was because these so-called nobility disciples weren't even worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as Qin Wendian. Such a voice caused those descendants of nobility and nobility who had participated in the plot against Qin Wendian to lose all face, feeling too ashamed to show their faces. A few days later, news regarding Qin Wendian gradually spread to the royal palace. It was very easy to investigate Qin Wendian's background. His experiences in the immortal realms were very simple, but he had done several sensational things. In the royal palace, the name of Qin Wendian rang out once more. So it turned out that Qin Wendian wasn't only so arrogant in the Qi King manner. He had been even more arrogant in the past. Qin Wendian participated in the 100-year grand banquet of the Dongshengshan Gate and defeated all his opponents, becoming the top ranker. However, he and his fellow apprentice brothers had rejected the invitation of the Dongsheng Heaven Emperor, smacking the face of the Dongsheng Heaven Emperor at the Dongshengshan Gate. So it turned out that Qin Wendian truly had an immortal emperor standing behind his back. The Emperor Qianbian came here to welcome the top ranker of the immortal banquet, Qin Wendian, and fought against the Dongxing Heaven Emperor, demanding the territory of 6 prefectures. Not only that, it was rumored that Qin Wendian had killed the personal disciple of the Dongxing Heaven Emperor, Ke Tianyi, who was also the descendant of the scarce moon immortal king. He even killed the son of the Xian Emperor, Xian Xing, and defeated the son of Zidi, Zi Daoyang. Qin Wendian's simple experience was sufficient to make any nobility disciple of an immortal empire feel inferior. Just like what Qin Wendian had said back then when he attended the banquet at the Qi King Manor. What did they count for? If this was in the outside world, he would definitely dare to kill them. He had already done such a thing before. Yang An, Mu Feng, and the others felt even more ashamed after they learned of this news. Those people who had humiliated Qin Wendian at the banquet were too ashamed to show their faces. What qualifications did they have to humiliate Qin Wendian? Nobility disciples, what did they count for? Although His Majesty didn't agree to Qin Wendian entering Princess Qing Er's residence, he didn't object to Princess Qing Er and Qin Wendian staying in Princess Changping's residence either. Could it be that His Majesty has other intentions? Everyone started to speculate about the intentions of the Changqing the Great. Maybe, His Majesty was observing the situation now. In the future, if Qin Wendian grew stronger, His Majesty might really agree to this marriage. Qin Wendian actually has a high chance of becoming the prince consort of the immortal empire. Seems like we can't afford to offend him. Many people from the nobility residence were thinking. Not all the people from the nobility residence were targeting Qin Wendian. Back then during the banquet held by the Qi King Manor, those who targeted Qin Wendian were only a portion of people from the nobility residence. In addition, the playfulness of the juniors didn't represent the attitude of the nobility residence. To the nobility residence, Qin Wendian's current cultivation base was still weak. There was no need for him to interact with Qin Wendian yet. In the library of Princess Changping's residence, Qin Wendian and Qing were flipping through some ancient books, including the experiences of the seniors. Qin Wendian especially chose to browse through many ancient books on establishing an immortal foundation, absorbing more knowledge and combining it with his own knowledge. By doing so, his chances of establishing an immortal foundation would be higher. Qing was the same as Qin Wendian. She was also preparing to break through to the immortal foundation realm. In fact, the amount of time she spent at the 9th level of celestial phenomenon was even longer and her foundation was extremely stable. Elder sister Qing big brother Qin. At this moment, a melodious voice rang out as a beautiful figure walked into the library. Ling Qin Wendian stared at the person who just came. She was about 15 or 16 years of age and had a lively demeanor. She was none other than the youngest daughter of Princess Changping. Big brother Qin, these are the things you wanted. Mother told me to pass them to you. Ling passed an interspatial ring to Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian received it and smiled, many thanks to Princess and Ling These were all exchanged for using immortal ranked weapons. There's no need to thank me. Since Big Brother Qin is collecting these, are you preparing to break through to the immortal foundation realm? Since Big Brother Qin is so powerful, you would definitely succeed in a single attempt. Ling smiled. Let's hope so. Qin Wendian glanced at Qing only to hear Qing asking in a low voice, are you preparing to enter closed-door seclusion? I have no idea how long it would take for me to break through to the immortal foundation realm. If there's a chance of success, I might choose to enter closed-door seclusion for a longer period of time. What about you, Qing You are in closed-door seclusion, I will as well. Qing mumbled. Qin Wendian smiled and nodded his head. Right now, the royal palace was quiet and there was no longer anyone looking for trouble with him. Let's break through to the immortal foundation realm in the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom. Chapter 1003. At this moment, Qin Wendian appeared at the cultivation platform in Princess Changping's residence. This cultivation platform was located at the peak of a solitary mountain within a residence. With a single glance, one could see the starry skies. This was the most suitable place for cultivation. As for Qing'er, she wasn't here. She had returned to her princess residence and was in closed-door seclusion to break through to Immortal Foundation. Naturally, Chongqing the Great would act as her protector. On the cultivation platform, there were 3 gigantic divine inscription diagrams inscribed by Qin Wentian. These diagrams were like sacrificial altars, flickering with resplendent astral light. Numerous runic inscriptions intersected with one another, converging at the very center of the diagrams. He, Little Rascal, and Purgatory each obtained one. After Qin Wentian finished inscribing the formation, he waved his hands as numerous mountainous Yuan meteor stones appeared. Not only so, around Qin Wentian, there were also many crystalline crystals that exuded a terrifying aura. These crystals were all immortal crystals, an essential item for establishing an immortal foundation. For stellar martial cultivators, the amount of resources required to establish an immortal foundation was extremely terrifying. Qin Wentian used many immortal-ranked weapons and passed them to Princess Chongping, telling her to prepare the necessary treasures for him to establish his immortal foundation. During these days, Qin Wentian had also browsed through many ancient scrolls. In addition to the knowledge he already had and the experiences of his seniors, he already had a very good understanding of establishing an immortal foundation. He also knew that this was a very long process. Mo Xia, Yang An, and Mu Feng were all immortal foundation experts that Qin Wentian had fought against before. However, Qin Wentian knew that although the 3 of them had immortal foundation, they had yet to fully step into the immortal foundation realm. They couldn't be considered as complete immortal foundation experts. At the celestial phenomenon realm, one's astral souls would transform into a constellation. As for the immortal foundation realm, one had to use all of their astral souls to establish their immortal foundation. Mo Xia, Yang An, and the others might have only used one of their astral souls to establish their immortal foundation. Their immortal foundation couldn't even be considered the lowest grade of immortal foundation. However, establishing an immortal foundation wasn't something that could be accomplished in a single attempt. As long as one succeeded on the first attempt, it meant that they already had one foot in the immortal foundation realm. To many people, establishing an immortal foundation was an extremely long process. Wanting to establish a high-grade immortal foundation was even more difficult. An incomplete immortal foundation expert required Qin Wentian to go all out before he could fight against them. As for a complete immortal foundation expert, even if he had only established a low-grade immortal foundation, it would still be extremely difficult for him to fight against them. This was the disparity in cultivation levels, it was extremely difficult to surpass. For immortal foundation experts, Qin Wentian had to go all out before he could fight against them. But for immortal foundation experts, even if they had only established a low-grade immortal foundation, it would still be extremely difficult for him to fight against them. This was the disparity between their cultivation bases, it was extremely difficult to overcome. Who? Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath and stared at the sky. After which, he walked to the center of the formation and sat down cross-legged. A tyrannical aura gushed forth from him, and in just an instant, his constellation shone brightly as his astral souls shot up into the sky. Little Rascal and Purgatory were on the other 2 formations. They were demonic beasts and naturally had their own unique cultivation arts. There was naturally no need for Qin Wentian to worry about them. The Heavenly Hammer Constellation, Great Dream Constellation, Demon Sovereign Constellation, Gigantic Sword Constellation, and Golden Body Constellation. The light from these 5 constellations simultaneously cascaded onto Qin Wentian, establishing a connection with him. Qin Wentian's perception floated upwards, following the connection. His perception arrived in the starry space and saw the 5th constellation, a constellation from the 7th heavenly layer. The golden body of the gigantic body was akin to a divinity, radiating an incomparably terrifying law energy. Each strand of law energy contained a terrifying suppressive might, and right now, it was even clearer than before. The law energy flowing within the constellations from the 7th heavenly layer is so clear and distinct. The higher the grade of the constellation, the easier it is to establish an immortal foundation. Qin Wentian was preparing to use this constellation as the foundation for the first part of his immortal foundation. He believed that it wouldn't take too long. Qin Wentian began to immerse himself in his perception. Beside Qin Wentian, Little Rascal was also sitting in a formation. He inclined his head and stared up at the sky, closing his eyes. In the starry space, beams of light cascaded down on him. Demonic beasts were different from humans. For powerful demonic beasts, they had the innate ability to sense constellations of the same species and absorb the energy within. In a place immeasurably far away, in a particle world, there was a towering edifice that resembled a heavenly altar. A figure could be seen sitting there, exuding an extraordinary aura. This was a young man, and his features were exactly the same as the Qin Wentian who was separated from him by a world. He was also preparing to establish his immortal foundation, and was preparing to step into the immortal foundation realm together with his original body. In another particle world, this seemed to be a desolate particle world. The stellar martial cultivators of this world were all clad in ancient robes. In front of a great hall, countless people were gathered together as though they were on a pilgrimage. They stared at the peak of the sky, and over there, a young man could be seen sitting cross-legged. Is our king about to become an immortal? An old man with a scepter in his hand stared at the peak of the great hall. He slowly knelt on the ground, a glimmer of hope could be seen in his eyes. Behind him, numerous figures knelt down one after another, staring at the clean and neat young man sitting there. In the air, there was an expert with the demeanor of an immortal. His gaze was calm as he stared at the young man. Meng Chen, you are an innately born king of the world. This time, establishing your immortal foundation is a transformation for you. Once you complete this transformation, you would surpass countless other immortal foundation characters. Your transformation would be more terrifying compared to others. I hope you can establish a saint-grade immortal foundation. That person silently mused. To many people, establishing their immortal foundation was a transformation, a sublimation. But he understood that to Jun Mengchen, establishing his immortal foundation was much more important compared to others. Not only would his cultivation base rise to a higher level, he would also be reborn anew. In the immortal realms, the Nam Huang clan was a powerful and ancient clan. On a phoenix altar, a supreme beauty could be seen sitting there. The shadow of an ancient phoenix could be seen circling around her, crying out unceasingly. The shadow of the phoenix unceasingly drilled into her body. However, her beautiful eyes were tightly shut, her consciousness was already floating in the starry space. The same scene was happening to Zi Qingxian and Hua Taixiu. They were currently in different locations in the immortal realms, trying to break through to immortal foundation, preparing to ascend to immortality in a single step. In the blink of an eye, 2 months passed. During these 2 months, Qin Wentian's figure suddenly disappeared from the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom. Princess Qing'er had also vanished as well. There was news circulating in the Emperor Palace that Princess Qing'er was in closed-door seclusion, attempting to break through to immortal foundation. After which, everyone knew that Qin Wentian was also in the midst of doing so. Yang An, who had his throat slit by a single sword strike from Qin Wentian, as well as Mu Feng, who fought against Qin Wentian, had also entered closed-door seclusion. Just like what Qin Wentian had guessed, the two of them couldn't be considered as complete immortal foundation experts. This was especially so for Yang An. He had only used 2 types of astral souls to establish his immortal foundation. He couldn't even be considered half-immortal foundation. Mu Feng was in a slightly better state compared to Yang An. He spent several years and had already surpassed the half-step immortal foundation realm. Most probably, he only needed a few more years to establish a complete immortal foundation. At this moment, on the cultivation platform in Princess Changping's residence, Qin Wentian's perception was still focused on the golden constellation. Streams of light flowed unceasingly into Qin Wentian's astral souls, and at this moment, a terrifying vortex appeared around Qin Wentian. The streams of light were no longer pure astral light, but astral light formed from laws. They contained a shocking amount of energy and was currently baptizing Qin Wentian's body, flowing into his Yuanfu. This was the advantage of having a constellation in the seventh heavenly layer. The constellation itself seemed to have a clear law energy flowing within it. By connecting with such a constellation, one would be able to complete the first step of establishing an immortal foundation in the shortest time possible. The fortune stones and immortal crystals in the surroundings were being consumed at a terrifying rate, flowing unceasingly into Qin Wentian's body, transforming into a golden immortal physique. This was the most basic form of an immortal foundation. As time flowed by, all sorts of resources were being consumed at a terrifying rate. In the air, law energy also flowed unceasingly as his immortal foundation gradually took form. Resplendent immortal light shone from Qin Wentian as a resplendent constellation appeared in and out of existence, containing the power of law energy. Qin Wentian breathed in and out immortal light. His perception was directed towards another constellation, that terrifying king's sword. This sword didn't have any law energy flowing within it, but Qin Wentian himself had already comprehended a trace of the law of swords. Next, he needed to focus on comprehending it, guiding the law energy from the constellation into his body. This required an extremely high level of comprehension. Qin Wentian knew that if he wanted to establish a complete immortal foundation in one go, he would need a very long period of hard work. Breaking through to immortal foundation wasn't something that could be accomplished in a single go. He continued his seclusion, unaware of the flow of time. Cultivation in the immortal realm was the most time-consuming. The higher one's cultivation base, the slower their cultivation speed would be. Becoming an immortal before 100 years of age would already be considered a rare genius. However, being able to step into the immortal king realm within 10,000 years was already considered very impressive. After establishing an immortal foundation, every additional layer in the future would require even more effort. In the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom, there was a residence that was adjacent to the Emperor Palace where the Evergreen Immortal Emperor resided. In this residence, a white-robed figure stared up at the sky. The eyes of this white-robed figure were incomparably deep, as though he could see through the void. From afar, the cry of an azure one could be heard. The white-robed figure retracted his gaze and stared at the beautiful silhouette on the back of the azure one. Father. This beautiful silhouette was none other than Princess Lioli, whom Qin Wentian had met once before. You're back. The eyes of the white-robed figure flashed with warmth. I heard that Qin Wentian came to the royal palace. Princess Lioli asked. He has been here for quite some time now. He came back together with Qing'er. Seems like it was because of your guidance back then. Is it him? Princess Lioli asked. The White Emperor inclined his head and stared at the sky as he laughed in a low voice. Seems like there's no mistake. Should we tell the Evergreen Immortal Emperor? Princess Lioli asked. The White Emperor shook his head lightly. Just follow the will of the heavens. Tell him that the power of man will change some things. There's no need for you to interfere, just let nature take its course. Chapter 1004. The Azure Mystic Immortal Realms were boundlessly vast. Immortal emperors were the rulers of an area, while immortal kings could be considered experts. Only immortal foundation characters could be considered to have stepped onto the path of true experts. As for celestial phenomenon, it was usually the stage for the younger generation. If one was too old and was still at the celestial phenomenon realm, their accomplishments would naturally be limited. It was already considered not bad if they could step into the immortal realm. Celestial phenomenon realm. In the perspective of the boundless immortal realms, they were merely a grain of sand in a desert, completely inconspicuous. Although Qin Wentian caused quite a commotion in the Evergreen Kingdom Palace, he was still an insignificant character when compared to the entire immortal realms. Very few people would notice him. Hence, when Qin Wentian and the others entered seclusion, there wouldn't be any ripples in the entire immortal realms. In the immortal realms, the strong preyed on the weak. Every day, there would be experts of different cultivation realms being born or falling. There was a matter that caused quite a commotion. A peak-stage immortal emperor named Zidi led experts to attack the myriad Devil Islands, causing a huge commotion. It was rumored that Zidi did this to avenge his son. His son Zi Daoyang was killed by a junior from the myriad devil islands in the city of ancient emperors. However, how could the myriad devil islands be so easy to kill their way in? That place was where the strongest devil cultivators of the immortal realms gathered, and there were countless devil sects there. Some peak-stage devil emperors were terrifying to the extreme, even the Violet Emperor could only return in defeat. Although the myriad devil islands were chaotic, with endless slaughter and plunder, they wouldn't allow immortal emperors of the immortal realms to step into their territory. This was an order from the myriad devil sovereign. And today, Zidi even sent people to the Evergreen Kingdom's royal palace to pay his respects to the Changqing the Great. The Evergreen Great Emperor personally received them. In the Great Hall of the Emperor Palace, there were many nobility characters present. Outside the Great Hall, a group of figures could be seen. All of them were extraordinary characters, at the Immortal King realm. This was especially so for the Immortal King in the lead. He looked extremely young, around 30 to 40 years of age, but his actual age was far beyond that. The eyes of this young Immortal King were extremely deep, exuding a tyrannical aura. Nephew Zi Daolong pays his respects to Uncle Changqing. This young Immortal King bowed to Changqing the Great. Junior pays my respects to Changqing the Great. The people behind him all bowed. Although they were the subordinates of the Violet Emperor, they still had to be polite and respectful to the Evergreen Immortal Emperor. Virtuous nephew, there's no need to be so polite. How would you have the time to visit my empire? Uncle should already know that my younger brother, Daoyang, was killed by someone in the city of ancient emperors. According to investigations, the one who killed Daoyang was none other than Mo Xie from the myriad devil islands. However, his ranking on the Immortal Ascension rankings is higher than Daoyang's. Even if Daoyang was ranked higher than Daoyang, his strength should be roughly the same. He must have died from a sneak attack, in addition to the fact that Daoyang was injured. Zi Daolong went straight to the point. And as for the person who injured Daoyang, according to what nephew knows, he is currently in the royal palace of uncle's empire. You are talking about Qin Wentian, right? I also know a little about this matter. Qin Wentian is a good friend of my daughter. It's said that in the city of ancient emperors, Qin Wentian fought with Junior Daoyang publicly, injuring Junior Daoyang. After that, Junior Daoyang was assassinated. It's truly regretful. It's just that it's a little inappropriate for Junior Daoyang to vent his anger on Qin Wentian. Changqing the Great slowly spoke. The hearts of the nobility immortal empire trembled. They didn't expect that their emperor would actually speak up for Qin Wentian. Uncle and my father are good friends and would often drink and discuss the Tao together. However, who would have thought that younger sister Qing Er would actually have a conflict with Daoyang in the city of ancient emperors? This matter is truly heartbreaking, but since Princess Qing Er and Daoyang weren't acquainted, my father and I naturally won't blame her. However, Qin Wentian was implicated in Daoyang's death. Uncle, can you hand him over to me so that I can bring him back? Zi Daolong continued. Changqing the Great frowned. He then replied, Nephew, no matter what, Qin Wentian can be considered a guest of my empire. He isn't the one who killed Junior Daoyang. If there's a grudge between you and Qin Wentian, you can settle it yourself after Qin Wentian leaves my empire. It wouldn't be too appropriate for me to hand him over to you directly. This nephew understands uncle's meaning. Farewell. Zi Daolong bowed to Changqing the Great. After that, the group of them retreated out of the Great Hall. Changqing the Great didn't try to hold them back, allowing them to leave. He then spoke, help me send my nephew off. Yes. Someone outside replied. Not long after, Zi Daolong and his group left the royal palace. Father, Zidi directly came to our royal palace to demand for Qin Wentian. He is getting more and more tyrannical. Changqing the Great's son directly spoke. Changqing the Great was the ruler of the empire. Regardless of whether Qin Wentian was someone from the royal palace or not, since he was already in the royal palace, if Zidi came here directly to demand for Qin Wentian, it would be somewhat disrespectful to Changqing the Great. No matter what, Qin Wentian was brought into the royal palace by Princess Qing Er. If Qin Wendian was handed over to Zi Daolong, what would others say? He has always been this tyrannical. Changqing the Great smiled, his heart was calm and he didn't mind it too much. Since Zi Daolong came to demand for Qin Wendian, he just had to refuse. Zidi should have already guessed that His Majesty would reject him. Why did he still send Zi Daolong here to make the request? Someone frowned. Zi Daoyang's death clearly caused Zidi's mood to be extremely bad. In addition to the fact that he failed to invade the myriad Devil Islands, as well as Qing Heir's unfriendly attitude in the City of Ancient Emperors, Zidi couldn't remain calm anymore. Changqing the Great stared at the air. Although the elders wouldn't participate in the battles between juniors, things wouldn't be so simple if the descendants of immortal kings and emperors died. Your Majesty, will Zidi personally demand for Qin Wendian? Someone worriedly asked. Zidi was a peak-stage immortal emperor of the immortal realms. His strength might even be above immortal emperors. If he personally appeared, even the immortal emperors wouldn't be able to reject him. Qin Wendian didn't kill Zi Daoyang. He is a peak-stage immortal emperor, he wouldn't dare to say such a thing. He should have handed this matter over to Zi Daolong. How serious, he actually vented his anger on Qin Wendian. Changqing the Great shook his head. Mobilizing Zi Daolong and several other immortal kings, this was already an extremely serious matter. To Qin Wendian, this definitely wasn't good news. Qin Wendian, who was in seclusion, naturally wouldn't know of this. He also didn't expect that Zi Daoyang's death would be blamed on him. Naturally, this was also because of Xiao Lingyue. When Zidi investigated Zi Daoyang's death, he found Xiao Lingyue who had exited the City of Ancient Emperors. Xiao Lingyue's hatred for Qin Wendian had yet to dissipate. Hence, she said some unfavorable things about Qin Wendian in front of Zidi. In fact, she even said some unfavorable things about Qing Heir. Hence, Zidi didn't care about Changqing the Great's face and directly sent Zi Daolong to demand for Qin Wendian. Time flowed by, everything that happened in the outside world had nothing to do with Qin Wendian. In the blink of an eye, he had already been in seclusion for over 2 years. At this moment, in the cultivation grounds of the Princess Changping residence, the mountain of cultivation resources had already been depleted by half. Qin Wendian's body glowed with a resplendent immortal light. His entire body was translucent, and his skin seemed to be rejuvenated, gleaming faintly. Within his body, there were a total of 5 yuanfu. Within each yuanfu, an immortal foundation could be seen, radiating terrifying immortal light. In the air, law energy continued to flow downwards unceasingly, growing purer and purer. But even so, other than the golden immortal foundation, the other 4 immortal foundations weren't as pure as before. Compared to the golden immortal foundation, they were still far from being perfect. Because of the multiple yuanfu, my immortal foundation is actually different from others. Qin Wendian manifested his immortal sense as he surveyed his body. For others, they used law energy to fuse their immortal foundations into a unique immortal foundation. This immortal foundation was an immortal foundation that contained terrifying power. However, it was different for him. His immortal foundations were located in different yuanfu, how should he fuse them together? Forget it, my immortal foundation is already so distinct. In that case, I shall sever my imperfect immortal foundation and reforge it. Qin Wendian silently mused. A terrifying tempest of law energy manifested in his body. His body was being destroyed bit by himself. If he wanted to perfect his immortal foundation, he had to sever his immortal foundation first. His immortal foundation was already sufficiently pure, but it wasn't perfect. A surge of destructive energy manifested in Qin Wendian's body. Qin Wendian gritted his teeth, he believed that he was more suitable than others to slay his immortal foundation. Rumble. His body was being destroyed unceasingly. Qin Wendian roared, "Sever!" As the sound of his voice faded, the destructive energy directly blasted into one of his immortal foundations. Boundless destructive might bore down on him, shattering his immortal foundation bit by bit. Pooh! Qin Wendian coughed out a mouthful of blood. He felt his soul trembling. This pain was so excruciating that it seeped into his heart. Sever, sever. Qin Wentian's heart was unshakable. He coughed out blood unceasingly as his body was being destroyed. Luckily, his physique was perfect and he could endure it. If he didn't have a perfect physique, his body might really have crumbled apart. Roar! A low-sounding roar rang out from Qin Wentian's mouth. When his immortal foundations shattered one after another, he finally couldn't endure the pain and directly fainted. Next, he still needed to use his powerful will to reconstruct his immortal foundation. Luckily, Qin Wentian's 5 immortal foundations weren't a single entity. His golden body was already perfect and there was no need to sever it. Hence, there was still immortal energy in his body and he wasn't completely crippled. After Qin Wentian woke up, he continued his cultivation. In the starry space, the energy left behind by the constellations grew even purer. That was the power of law energy, perfect and flawless. They flowed into Qin Wentian's body. In the blink of an eye, another half a year passed. During this half a year, Qin Wentian's immortal foundation was reconstructed. In addition, every single one of his immortal foundations was sparkling and translucent, flawless and flawless. Qin Wentian's body grew even more perfect, radiating an incomparable radiance. He sat cross-legged with his naked body, resembling a newborn infant. Every inch of his skin was like a gift bestowed by the heavens and earth. However, Qin Wentian knew that what he wanted to do wasn't over yet. It's about time to condense the next astral soul and reconstruct the best immortal foundation I can. Qin Wentian mused. His perception shot up into the clouds, heading towards the 9 heavenly layers. Right now, he was already at the half-step immortal foundation realm. He was only a few more steps away from truly stepping into the immortal foundation realm. Chapter 1005. Qin Wentian's perception entered the 9 heavenly layers. He who was already at the half-step immortal foundation realm had an even stronger perception compared to back then when he condensed his 5th astral soul. His tyrannical perception could even remain in the 7th heavenly layer for a long period of time. His perception floated about the 7th heavenly layer. He saw many strange constellations with terrifying auras. However, Qin Wentian's perception didn't stop there. He continued to extend his perception towards the starry space even further away. He wanted to try and see if he could condense a connection with the constellations in the 8th heavenly layer. If his perception could reach the 8th heavenly layer, how tyrannical would the constellations there be? Qin Wentian's heart was filled with an intense desire. As his perception continued forward, he gradually felt a terrifying pressure bearing down on him. However, as a half-step immortal foundation expert, his perception was much stronger compared to before. He was still able to endure it. Finally, he arrived at the boundary between the 7th and 8th heavenly layers. There seemed to be a supreme energy obstructing him from advancing. Rush! There was only a single thought in Qin Wentian's heart. He had to rush up no matter what. In the 8th heavenly layer, even if it was the weakest constellation, the might contained within it would be stronger compared to constellations from the 7th heavenly layer. The augmentation to his strength would be on another level. In addition, he could see the flow of law energy in the constellations from the 7th heavenly layer with a single glance. Wouldn't it be even more obvious in the 8th heavenly layer? The power of the law energy flowing through the constellations would be even stronger and tyrannical. Right now, he still didn't know if he could establish a saint-grade immortal foundation, but he had to give it a try. Boom! Qin Wentian felt a splitting headache, as though his brain was about to explode. He gritted his teeth and furrowed his brows, carrying with him an incomparably intense will. He had even endured the pain of killing his immortal foundation. He would still succeed in breaking through to the 8th heavenly layer. His perception grew stronger and stronger, as though he was about to step into the 8th heavenly layer. Finally, his perception surpassed everything and descended upon the 8th heavenly layer. A destructive might directly bore down on him, and with a thunderous boom, Qin Wentian's mind turned blank as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. His body softly slumped to the ground as he actually fainted. Several days later, Qin Wentian woke up. He sat up, and celestial light flowed around his body again. He raised his head and looked at the sky with a deep obsession. You don't want me to enter, but I insist on doing so. How strong are the constellations of the 8th heavenly layer exactly? Qin Wentian's perception once again extended towards the 9 heavens star river. Endless starlight sprinkled on his body. The starry sky was so beautiful, but to Qin Wentian, he wasn't in the mood to appreciate the beauty of the starry sky. He wanted to conquer it. Within this 1 month, Qin Wentian experienced 3 failures and fainted 3 times. His perception was so strong that he could see a single constellation. At that time, the constellation was in the shape of an ancient halberd that could shatter the heavens. Jet black light flowed around it, exuding an incomparably terrifying light. That beam of light that cascaded downwards contained a terrifying amount of destructive might. Although it's a weapon-type constellation, the law contained within it should be destruction. Qin Wentian's perception descended for the 4th time. That gigantic halberd in the 8th heavenly layer seemed to be able to pierce through the heavens. It was extremely terrifying. If he could form an innate connection with it, his attacks would naturally contain destructive might. If he could comprehend the laws of this constellation, he would be able to establish an immortal foundation of the law of destruction. When he attacked, his destructive might would be amplified, and he would be able to kill immortals and devils with boundless might. Qin Wentian didn't have the ability to choose other constellations. But naturally, this constellation was already sufficient to satisfy him. This was a constellation from the 8th heavenly layer. He could choose many constellations from the 7th heavenly layer, but he would rather not choosing this constellation instead. In fact, when he tried to form an innate connection with this constellation, he experienced several failures. His perception was destroyed, and he was in unbearable pain. After several months of struggle, he was filled with an incomparably firm conviction. Finally, a beam of astral light cascaded down from the 8th heavenly layer, breaking through everything, landing on Princess Changping's residence, landing on Qin Wentian. In the White Emperor Palace, a white-robed figure stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He inclined his head and stared at the sky, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying white light, as though he could see through the past and present, piercing through the heavens and earth. 8th heavenly layer. That figure mumbled in a low voice. Although his tone was calm, his heart wasn't. He retracted his gaze, as though nothing had happened. He no longer stared at the sky. Right now, it has been almost 3 years since Qin Wentian and Qing were in closed-door seclusion. The 2 of them had yet to exit their seclusion, and the people in the royal palace would occasionally think of the 2 of them. They were all wondering if the 2 of them would be able to succeed in establishing a complete immortal foundation, ascending to immortality with a single step and stepping into the half-step immortal foundation realm. If they truly wanted to establish a complete immortal foundation, how many years would they need? Most probably, the time required wouldn't be short. This was a process everyone had to go through in order to become an immortal. It would be best if they could ascend to immortality in a single step. If they failed even once, it would be a huge blow to their confidence, and they might even fail again in the future. Ascending to immortality in a single step, establishing a complete immortal foundation in a single breath. This was the most ideal method for stellar martial cultivators to break through to the immortal realm. Qin Wentian condensed his constellation, opened his astral gate, established his Yuanfu, and established his astral soul. Step by step, he began to absorb the terrifying astral light from the 8th heavenly layer, and at the same time, he was trying to comprehend the fearsome law energy of destruction. To establish an immortal foundation, one had to first comprehend the law energy before they could draw it into their body, using the law energy to establish a powerful immortal foundation. This was another long process. Without a firm conviction, it would be hard for one to become an immortal. Without a strong comprehension ability, it would be hard for one to become an immortal. Many people were stuck at the peak of celestial phenomenon for their entire lives. There were also many people who were stuck at the half-step immortal realm. Although they were also immortals, the disparity between them and a complete immortal foundation expert was too great. In the immortal realms, there were many such half-step immortals. Qin Wendian had never been in closed-door seclusion for such a long period of time. He finally understood why when one reached the immortal realm, a single session of closed-door seclusion would be equivalent to an entire lifetime. For Immortal Foundation characters, if they really went into closed-door seclusion, it would be equivalent to an ordinary person going through a lifetime. This wasn't a lie. It has already been 4 years since Qin Wendian went into closed-door seclusion. Qin Wendian's 6th Immortal Foundation was established, and after the Immortal Slaying Foundation, it was finally perfected. His immortal sense peered into his body. 6 Immortal Foundations were born. Although they weren't fused together like the immortal foundations of others, there was still a marvelous connection between them. Strands of law energy intersected with each other as a terrifying law energy radiated from his body, enveloping all 6 of his immortal foundations. The law energy continued to overlap as a marvelous transformation occurred. There was nothing else on Qin Wendian's body. That flawless skin, that sparkling and translucent body, was so perfect. The contours of his face were even more distinct, his demeanor was even more imposing, and he was even more handsome. This was immortality. In the immortal realm, there were fewer ugly people. Unless they were unkempt and were innately ugly, when they reached the immortal realm, their entire person would undergo a transformation. Their skin would become flawless, their demeanor would grow even more outstanding, and they would be shrouded in a halo of immortality, becoming even more handsome and beautiful. The transformation of his external appearance seemed to have reached the extreme, but the transformation within his body was still ongoing. His 6 immortal foundations glowed with immortal light, intertwining together as a transformation occurred. For immortal foundation experts, they had to establish a complete immortal foundation. Right now, Qin Wendian had yet to complete the final step. The white light flowed within Qin Wendian's body, circulating around his 6 immortal foundations. There was no law energy that could destroy it. The law energy from the 6 immortal foundations frenziedly flowed towards it as a terrifying tempest brewed within Qin Wendian's body. Boundless law energy converged together, completely infusing into the white light. Qin Wendian's immortal sense was focused on the transformation of his body as his heart pounded. It was best to establish a complete immortal foundation. Initially, one had to rely on one's own insights to establish it. However, he seemed to be an exception. Everything flowed naturally. In the external world, in the sky, the constellations in the sky, the light of law energy cascaded down on him, frenziedly flowing into his body. Qin Wendian discovered that in the center of his 6 immortal foundations, the law energy converged to form a brand new immortal foundation that was completely sparkling and flawless. This immortal foundation took on the form of a human and gradually grew clearer, resembling a divinity that had attained the Tao. It had an innate immortal body and contained a divine charm. The law energy from the 6 immortal foundation converged on it as rumbling sounds rang out. This human-shaped immortal foundation grew more and more corporeal, shining with boundless light. The 6 immortal foundations also gradually turned transparent. Although they were still sparkling and translucent, the law energy within them seemed to be circulating around the human-shaped immortal foundation. Rumble. A heaven-shaking transformation occurred within Qin Wendian's body. The 6 immortal foundations he had formed earlier were all reduced to a wedding dress. But even so, they still existed. Qin Wendian's body transformed into a terrifying vortex. All the resources in the surroundings were sucked into his body, unceasingly being devoured. Qin Wendian seemed to have transformed into a gigantic silkworm cocoon, trapped within. The remaining resources were all being consumed at a terrifying speed until one day, all the resources in the surroundings had been completely consumed, leaving nothing behind. Qin Wendian's body abruptly radiated boundless light that pierced through the sky. A phenomenon manifested in the air, as though a divinity was about to appear. In the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom, at this moment, many people inclined their heads and stared at the sky as a strange look appeared on their faces. What's that? The crowd only saw boundless multicolored light in the air as a phenomenon manifested in the sky. One could faintly see the silhouette of a human. This is a phenomenon manifested in the sky. The hearts of many people trembled. Some characters with nobility stepped out of their residences and stood with their hands clasped behind their backs as they stared at the sky. What did this phenomenon signify? In the Emperor Palace, the evergreen immortal emperor stood there. His gaze was also fixed on the sky, quietly observing the phenomenon that occurred. The silent royal palace of the immortal empire suddenly became lively. Many people asked their elders what this phenomenon represented. However, even for those at the king or marquis level, they had no way to give an accurate answer. What did this phenomenon signify? For a phenomenon to manifest in the sky, there must definitely be a demon-level character. Over there, it seemed to be the airspace above Princess Changping's residence. Qin Wentian was still in closed-door seclusion, establishing his immortal foundation. Chapter 1006. Is this phenomenon caused by Qin Wentian establishing his immortal foundation? In the royal palace of the empire, the nobility was shaken. Their immortal senses swept out, enveloping Princess Changping's residence. At this moment, Princess Changping and the Scarlet Eye Marquis were also staring at the sky, staring at the location where Qin Wentian was at. Is it him? The Scarlet Eye Marquis mumbled. Other than him, only his demonic beast is cultivating on the cultivation platform. This phenomenon should be caused by him, and there's a high possibility that he has already established his immortal foundation. We will know once we see if he ends his seclusion or not. Princess Changping spoke in a low voice. If this is the case, this fellow is simply too extraordinary. Being able to create a phenomenon while establishing his immortal foundation, could it be that he has already established a saint-grade immortal foundation? The Scarlet Eye Marquis casually laughed, his words causing a bright light to flash through Princess Changping's eyes. A phenomenon would appear when establishing a saint-grade immortal foundation? I'm not sure, there's no record of this in the ancient records. But no matter what, since there's a phenomenon occurring in the sky, it must be something extraordinary. Seems like another immortal king was born naturally. The Scarlet Eye Marquis laughed. Qing'er was an innate immortal king, and even the lowest achievement she had would be at least at the immortal king realm. And now, Qin Wentian had created a phenomenon after establishing his immortal foundation. His talent was even higher compared to Qing'er. At this moment, the phenomenon in the sky vanished as everything returned to normal. However, the attention of the crowd was still focused on Princess Changping's residence. On the cultivation platform, Qin Wentian's entire body radiated an incomparably resplendent immortal light. With an intention of his will, the immortal light dissipated as he opened his eyes, gleaming with sharpness. His aura had completely changed, and his entire person exuded an immortal might. Immortal. Qin Wentian spoke. Right now, his immortal foundation had been completely established and he had stepped into the immortal foundation realm. In addition, his foundation was incomparably stable, having a saint-grade immortal foundation and a perfect physique. To other stellar martial cultivators, when they first became immortals, the immortal foundations they established would only be low-tier mortal grade. If their immortal foundations remained like this, their future accomplishments would be limited. Mortal-grade immortal foundations wouldn't have the qualifications to step into the immortal king realm. However, this wasn't their only chance. As they continued to cultivate and their cultivation base rose, their immortal foundations would need to be constantly perfected. During this incomparably long process, their immortal foundations would grow purer and more flawless. The impurities would be constantly expelled, and the grade of their immortal foundations would slowly rise. However, Qin Wentian was different from others. The moment he established his immortal foundation, it was already a saint-grade immortal foundation. This indicated that in the future, on his path of immortal foundation, there would be fewer detours and things would be extremely smooth. As for combat prowess, there was no doubt that saint-grade immortal foundation experts could suppress low-tier immortal foundation experts. For characters at the same level, even if they were heaven-chosen, Qin Wentian wouldn't even need to place them in his eyes. Glancing at his surroundings, everything was completely empty. He knew that he had already prepared sufficient cultivation resources to deal with any unexpected situations. However, he didn't expect that establishing a saint-grade immortal foundation would be so terrifying. It was simply unimaginable that for stellar martial cultivators who had no background and depended on themselves to cultivate, they wouldn't even be able to gather enough resources to establish their immortal foundation. They would need to spend a large amount of time risking their lives or joining a major power. In addition, this was only the starting point of the immortal foundation realm. There were a total of 9 stages of the Immortal Foundation, and if one wanted to reach the peak of Immortal Foundation, the amount of cultivation resources needed wasn't something ordinary celestial phenomenon ascendants could imagine. This was also the reason why many Immortal Foundation experts had to depend on others. Without a background, they had to depend on themselves to advance step by step. A 100-year Immortal Foundation and a 10,000-year Immortal King were all considered geniuses. The path of cultivation was treacherous, and the further one advanced, the harder it would be. Luckily for the Qin Wentian now, this first step to becoming an immortal could be said to be perfect. Closing his eyes, Qin Wentian didn't exit his seclusion immediately. He continued cultivating, holding the Sky Demon Oracle Bone in his hand as he guided the Fiend God Body Refinement Art. The first step Qin Wentian took was already sufficiently powerful, but he wasn't satisfied yet. He wanted to reach the most perfect and flawless state so that every step he took in the future would be perfect. Only then would there be no bottlenecks on his path of cultivation, allowing him to advance without any bottlenecks. Others could become immortal kings in 10,000 years, but Qin Wentian didn't want to take so long. Qin Wentian hasn't exited his seclusion yet. The people in the royal palace discovered that there were no movements from Qin Wentian, and they couldn't help but feel puzzled. Could it be that he hasn't established his immortal foundation yet? Just when many people in the royal palace started to pay attention to Qin Wentian, Yang An and Mu Feng, who were in closed-door seclusion, once again exited. Both of them had completed their immortal foundations, truly stepping into the immortal foundation realm. This caused some commotion in the royal palace. After all, it was already extremely rare for the two of them to be able to complete their immortal foundations in such a short period of time. The grade of Yang An's immortal foundation was extraordinary. Although it was only at the mortal grade, it was at the 3rd tier. Mu Feng's immortal foundation was also at the mortal grade, but it was at the 2nd tier, slightly inferior to Yang An's. Qing'er, Little Rascal, and Purgatory were still in closed-door seclusion. They wouldn't rest until they completed their immortal foundations. Today, Qin Wentian stopped his cultivation. His body glowed with a bright light, as though he was clad in armor. Glancing to the side, Little Rascal and Purgatory were both cultivating the law energy on the heaven-devouring dome. They seemed to have reached a crucial moment in their cultivation. He didn't disturb them and continued to close his eyes. His immortal sense flowed into his sea of consciousness, and there, a tiny astral being could be seen. Now that I've already become an immortal, the amount of energy in my body is incomparable to the past. Right now, I should be able to establish several astral fragments, right? Qin Wentian mused. His immortal sense drilled into the tiny astral being, and very swiftly, his immortal sense entered that vast space. His immortal foundation shone brightly, flowing towards the tiny astral being, following Qin Wentian's immortal sense. The external memories won't be of much use. I need the core memories to know what my father experienced in the past. Qin Wentian's immortal sense continued to penetrate deeper and deeper. He had once seen his parents in the memories of a constellation fragment. That indomitable man and that beautiful woman of unmatched magnificence had given everything they had to him when he was still a baby. Why did his parents do this? Why were Uncle Black and the others so cautious in their actions? In fact, they even brought him to a particle world and watched him grow up step by step. He knew that given the strength of his parents, it was sufficient for them to give him a better environment to grow up in. They didn't need to start from the bottom. Qin Wentian's immortal sense extended into the depths as terrifying immortal energy gushed forth, gushing towards the resplendent constellation fragments. The sounds of shattering rang out unceasingly. In an instant, a booming sound rang out in Qin Wentian's mind as scenes of memories flooded into his mind. Break, 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 break. Qin Wentian's immortal sense seemed to have gone crazy. The immortal foundation in his body radiated boundless light, frenziedly gushing towards the tiny astral being. That tiny astral being was like a terrifying vortex, able to absorb boundless energy. 2 hours, 4 hours. Gradually, Qin Wentian's immortal foundation grew dimmer. However, Qin Wentian seemed to have gone crazy. He had to know that a single memory fragment was far from enough. He wanted to know everything. Although Uncle Black promised to tell him, right now, he didn't even know where Uncle Black was. It would be more direct for him to search through the memories of his father. Finally, Qin Wentian's immortal sense retreated. Countless memories appeared in his mind. Qin Wentian closed his eyes, digesting these memories bit by bit. Countless scenes merged together in his mind. Qin Wentian seemed to have seen the growth of a young man. That was a lonely young man, a glorious palace, an ancient clan, and a majestic structure that resembled a divine temple. Qin Wentian's mind was filled with scenes of majesty that he had never seen before. Regardless of the Dongshengshan Gate or the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom, none of them were as majestic as this. However, that young man seemed to be lonely. He had an independent immortal palace, a majestic castle, and was the king of the younger generation. He had many servants, and these servants were all extremely powerful, loyal, and devoted, treating the young man as their leader. He was lonely because he had no companions. In fact, he didn't even have parents. These memories weren't completely connected. Hence, there were many things that Qin Wentian could only guess and deduce. This young man seemed to be a descendant of an ancient and powerful clan. However, he was merely the inheritor of a single bloodline. He had an incomparably glorious status and had an independent immortal palace that was comparable to the royal palace of the Evergreen Kingdom. However, there was only one young man. In the memories, only an old man appeared. This old man was none other than the ancestor of his young master. He brought the young man away and sent him to the same place as many geniuses of the younger generation. They cultivated together and experienced the cruelest of trials. These young men were all extraordinary, each with heaven-defying talent. Only the young man seemed to be very ordinary. Many people weren't willing to be together with him, intentionally distancing themselves from him, causing him to feel even more lonely. Only 2 young men were an exception. They were a man and a woman. They were the most outstanding among this group of young men, like kings. They were the moon surrounded by the stars, and the elders doted on them. They had extraordinary statuses and were doted on by countless people. In the fragmented memories, the youth had grown up. That handsome countenance made Qin Wentian understand that this was none other than the man he had seen in the scenes back then, his father. His father was incomparably strong and had experienced countless trials and tribulations. He grew stronger and stronger as his demeanor became more and more outstanding. He went out to temper himself, roaming the world. From a youth, he had grown into a man with an indomitable spirit that could support the heavens and earth. There were many people of the same generation who didn't get along with him and would often push him aside. However, he didn't care. He did things his own way and did what he believed in, even quarreling with some elders. He fell in love with that young woman who had once treated him very well. However, that young woman ended up together with another young man whom he viewed as a brother. They seemed to be a match made in heaven, the king of the younger generation, the envy of countless people. Although he felt sad in his heart, he still gave his blessings and the most precious gift. After that, he left alone, roaming the world alone. He met the most important woman in his life. At the instant he saw that woman, Qin Wentian's heart violently pounded. That woman was none other than his mother. In his memories, there was the first time they met. Evidently, to Qin Yuanfeng, this was an extremely precious memory. That woman was so beautiful, exuding magnificence through the generations, unrestrained and unrestrained. She treated him with disdain, yet he fell in love with her at first sight and pursued her madly.